Welcome to MINDSHOCK. This is your host, Bruce McGuire, and today we are refining the logical analysis system, mostly due to Craig of Fight the Flat Earth. He has exposed some flaws in the very basic system of simply counting fallacies and zingers. Just like in combat sports, someone kind of spamming an extremely pitter patter light jab that does basically no damage. If they do hundreds of them, is that really winning the decision if the other guy only lands maybe a couple of shots, but they're really, really solid, powerful shots? Is that the same thing? I wouldn't say so. I think we need to refine the system, make it a little bit more dynamic, make it more accurate. And for those that don't think that's a good idea, that we should look at volume alone, I mean, I would point you to the game of basketball. At some point, the 3 point line was established because why should the ball going through the hoop at a much closer distance count at a further distance for the same amount of points? I mean, it takes more skill to sink a three. I mean, they probably should even add a 5 pointer from beyond the half court line because obviously that shot is even harder. Who knows if people would actually attempt those, but that'd be probably be pretty funny. So let's see who joins us for this because obviously I'll be taking a lot of input here. We're going to go over a number of different things. Okay, so we're gonna start off with some basic definitions because I know if Craig jumps in here himself or any of his troll goofs, they like to pretend and hallucinate that Craig got fallacies for no reason just because they don't understand the basic definitions of words. Words like logic, what is or isn't a logical fallacy, what science is, what any of the fallacies are. I mean, I don't want to spend too much time on this because this isn't preschool and they should have already learned it, but apparently they didn't. But yeah, they just like to pretend and hallucinate that everything I said was baseless when, or it has anything to do with my opinion or anything to do with me. I mean, these are all empirically verifiable definitions. Literally, the only thing I claim on MindShock are that empirically verifiable definitions are empirically verifiable. That's it. When it comes to any kind of theories or conclusions, I don't claim anything is true or untrue. I don't claim anybody is correct or wrong about any conclusions or whatever the debate topic is. So again, there's some fundamental failure of understanding. Like, for example, Tsutsaka, who's in the chat right now. So maybe he'll learn something. I mean, hopefully he's got a tutor nearby because I've explained this before and a lot of people just have so much trouble with it. But we'll see what we can do. I'll wait for a couple more people to show up. And we'll just do this brief overview of the terms because mostly all the triggered goofs and the scientism cultists having meltdowns like Craig, most of it stems from this fundamental failure to understand basic definitions of words. Because then they're arguing on top of a house of cards and they're too utterly clueless to realize that it's even a house of cards. And then they get triggered whenever starts pointing out the bottom layer of the house of cards actually being a house of cards. And then on the psychological side, we have the issue with the Dunning-Kruger effect and also narcissism. Because if some of these goofs are too insecure, they're too mentally weak to even consider the possibility that they got some of these basic definitions wrong, they'll never even look in the dictionary or whatever to find out what the definitions even are. They'll just continue digging deeper and deeper holes. Quite sad, actually, but well, it depends. I mean, if they're legitimately mentally disabled, like Craig might be, if he's not just this super brilliant actor going full retard and being able to pull it off, unlike any other actor ever. Again, I don't claim any of these theories are true or untrue. This is all food for thought. We speculate on many different theories, many of them mutually exclusive, and obviously I'm not claiming any of them are true or untrue. So, yeah, let's see. We'll wait a couple more minutes. The YouTube algorithm, for whatever reason, doesn't usually push out the notifications. So, a lot of people that jump in on the stream simply happen to have seen them without getting a notification while scrolling. But we'll wait another minute or two and then we'll jump into all of these breakdowns. I really can't believe we even have to do this, but literally 99% of all the triggered goofs spiraling like Craig, the reason is that they don't understand these very basic definitions. I'm presenting many different theories, but I might have to boot you, Tutsaka, if you can't get focused. Because if somebody is mentally disabled, calling them mentally disabled isn't a childish insult. Same way, if you see a duck waddling and quacking, it's not childish or inaccurate to call it a duck or to point out the waddling and the quacking. Or, like it's this isn't rocket science. I don't know why you're having so much trouble with this, Tutsaka. Don't start crying now. I know you get triggered easily, but all right, we'll give it another minute for people to discover the stream since YouTube's probably not gonna put out the notifications because they don't usually do that. Okay, so a lot of people actually don't even know what logic even is. I guess in their brains, however deficient, they kind of assume it just means being smart or being correct. But let's get specific. So let's go to dictionary.com, an empirically verifiable resource where anybody, even small children, mentally disabled people, I mean, anybody can go to dictionary.com and type in logic if they know how to type. I mean, obviously, there's a certain English requirement in basic spelling, although it'll probably autocorrect it even if you type logic wrong. So, and here's another thing too. Like, obviously, certain generic terms have multiple definitions. This is where the etymological or no true Scotsman comes into play. These fallacies where people pretend there's only one definition. Like, obviously, science can be an umbrella term, whereas the scientific method itself is very specific. Specific should scare you, Tsutsaka, because if you don't have the mental capacity to even be on a first grade or preschool English level, I mean, how are you going to get specific about anything? Perhaps you're the only one butchering anything if you can't even confront your own deficiency to check basic definitions, which we're doing right now. So, a science that deals with the principles and criteria of validity. I mean, is that simple enough to understand? Another curiosity is, of course, semiotics, which is the study of symbols. So it's actually kind of curious that that's also a definition for logic. So all the Illuminati conspiracy theorists studying symbols and symbology, they're involved in semiotics, which is logic. So just it's kind of curious the difference between coincidence theorists and conspiracy theorists, especially when utilizing very, very specific definitions of words like logic. Did everybody follow that so far? I mean, this is like a preschool class now. I can't believe I even have to do this. But if I don't do this, then the chat's going to get flooded with all these clueless goofs demonstrating that they can't grasp this. They can't grasp even the most basic of definitions. So let's continue here. So if everybody understood that basic definition of logic, I mean, if you look it up, you'll see logic. I mean, all of the definitions are very, very similar here. Reason from Oxford, reasoning conducted or assessed according to strict principles of validity. Strict. So not just these generic, very, very hasty overviews. We're talking about being very, very strict. Another definition here, logic is the study of correct reasoning. It includes both formal and informal logic. Formal logic is the science of deductively valid inferences or logical truths. It studies how conclusions follow from premises due to the structure of the arguments alone, independent of their topic and content. Again, that's actually why I started the MindShock podcast, because a lot of goofs thinks it's illogical to even talk about paranormal phenomena or conspiracies or flat earth or whatever. They think it's illogical to even discuss it. I mean, the definition itself explicitly states that it's independent of topic or content. Yeah, this is preschool. I mean, I don't know what kind of preschool you went to. I mean, it's a variation. It's between preschool and maybe second grade, depending on the words. Like, for example, a preschooler probably could grasp what a fact is. I mean, I literally had preschool worksheet, like literal preschool worksheets regarding the scientific method. We're going to get to them again when we review part 1 and part 2 of Craig's meltdowns in the so-called debate. So we'll go over them explicitly. So it is preschool stuff. Now, not 100% of it. So it's not an obviously incorrect claim if, let's say, even 50% of the stuff is preschool stuff. It's still preschool stuff. I mean, this isn't rocket science, dude. Socket. Try to keep up. I don't know if you have the same fetish for humiliating yourself that Craig does, but you seem to be operating similar to Craig. So, what is valid or invalid? So, for example, random hallucinations or claims to blind faith with nothing to back that up, would those be valid inferences or logical truths? Would ignoring the scientific method during a scientific debate be valid? I mean, those are curious. Those are very, very curious. And again, this has nothing to do with topic or content. We're talking about structure in adherence with strict principles of validity. Try to pay attention to Taka. If you're going to be too distracting, you're going to get muted. Like, I've dumbed this down as much as possible. So, I mean, you might need a tutor, but if you can't get one, you just at least don't be distracting. All right. So, was all of that clear enough on exactly what logic is? Because if anybody still has any questions, if anybody is still confused, again, this has nothing to do with me. These are all empirically verifiable definitions that anybody with at least a partially working brain can verify for themselves. So, like Tutaka, Craig, like a lot of these clueless goofs, they pretend and hallucinate. I'm the one either making up definitions or all this stuff. I'm just using all of the empirically verifiable basic definitions that anybody can grasp. I mean, it's mind shocking that I even have to go over this stuff. I mean, that's what's truly mind shocking about all this. Okay, so let's continue here. And again, if anybody has any questions, jump in. I mean, I think I've dumbed this down as much as possible. Maybe I haven't, but I don't know how to dumb it down further. If people have ideas on that, feel free. Yes, Miranda, I think it's beyond clear, but I mean, look, Tutaka's still having difficulty here. I mean, I don't know. Okay, so now, what is a logical fallacy itself? Because this is another thing. Like a lot of these triggered goofs running around, they don't even know what a fallacy is while claiming I'm inaccurately identifying them. Okay, so Purdue has a pretty good definition here. Fallacies can be either illegitimate arguments or irrelevant points that are often identified because they lack evidence that supports their claim. Now, claim is a very important word because a lot of these goofs humiliating themselves, like Tutaka and Craig, they don't know what a claim is. A claim is an assertion about something. So something could be true that is irrelevant to supporting a claim. So it's not that people in debates, they could be saying something that is true, but it would still be a logical fallacy if it's not directly, if that truth is not directly supporting the claim or conclusion. Or obviously, if it's false, it could also be a fallacy. But even if it's true, saying something that's true doesn't automatically make it not a fallacy. This is something that, for whatever reason, a lot of people have trouble with. I don't think it's that difficult to grasp. But apparently, like, I never claimed I was smart in any way. I never claimed I was even above what? I think a fifth grade level? I mean, have I ever claimed I was smarter than that? I mean, I might have a whole bunch of degrees, but that doesn't mean I'm smarter than an average of a fifth grade level. And obviously, I would never even mention degrees because, I mean, that's like the fastest white flag in any argument. Like, how pathetic and insecure would someone have to be to even bring up a degree? I mean, that's like admitting your argument is so fallacious and has no substance. You have to pathetic and desperately grasp at pushing up some kind of degrees in some kind of plight for credibility, which is also fallacious because subjectively perceived credibility has nothing to do with anything. The truth is whatever it is. Yes, there are different types of claims, but even a legal claim is an assertion of something. Like, for example, saying you might have been injured, you may or may not have been injured in the workplace, that's not a claim. So if you're claiming you were injured in the workplace legally or otherwise, you'd be making a claim. A fallacy is the use of invalid or otherwise faulty reasoning in the construction of an argument that may appear to be well reasoned if unnoticed. Like, for example, like Craig of Fight the Flat Earth, like obviously he doesn't notice anything unless he's a super genius actor who, again, can just convincingly go full retard like no one else has been able to go before. But all of his followers, either they're cheerleading his mental health spiral, which is despicable. I mean, can you imagine like just cheerleading a mentally ill and mentally disabled individual into humiliating themselves? I mean, hopefully Craig has friends and family that can help him get the help he needs. Like, obviously, hopefully, I wish the guy all the best. I mean, I really hope he gets the help he needs, but his fetish for humiliating himself, if he's not a brilliant actor, I mean, it's rough. It's rough. So, faulty reasoning doesn't mean the conclusion is incorrect. I mean, I don't know how many times I have to say that. That's obviously the fallacy, but just because someone has faulty reasoning doesn't mean they're incorrect about the conclusion or claim they are arguing. Again, not rocket science, but so many people get lost on that. Just completely and utterly lost. So let's go over it again. I mean, there's really only two components here. They can be either illegitimate arguments or irrelevant points, whether true or untrue, that are identified because they lack evidence that support the claim. So a fallacy is the use of invalid or otherwise faulty reasoning in the construction of an argument, regardless of whether the argument is true or untrue, regardless of whether the components of the construction are true or untrue. Obviously, red herring logical fallacies are very common when people bring things up that are true, but they're not directly relevant to the argument at hand. They're a distraction, or non sequiturs as well. Things that have nothing to do with the claim, but might be true, and to a feeble mind like Tsutsaka here or Craig, they might appear to have some kind of relevancy or appear to be directly related to the conclusion claim, but they are not. Okay, is everybody good with that? Do we have to spend any more time identifying what a logical fallacy actually is? I mean, do I have to do this every 5 minutes in every analysis of every debate to kind of preempt the goofs? Because if you can't even understand this stuff, I mean, obviously this channel's not for you. I mean, most of the internet might not be for you. You have bigger problems than humiliating yourself in live chats like Tsutsaka if you can't even grasp this basic English. Okay, so let's carry on further. So one of the biggest, so basically in his mental health spirals, Craig counted every moment of his illiteracy as a logical fallacy for someone else, for me. So because he couldn't comprehend something, he counted that as a fallacy. Now, the fallacy he hallucinated, it was, most of the time, there was a few he hit, was appeal to the stone. So obviously he doesn't know what this fallacy is or any other fallacy, but let's look specifically of why he's so obviously wrong. So appeal to the stone is a logical fallacy or argument that follows 4 steps. An initial claim. So obviously I do not claim anything is true or untrue. So again, how can something be a fallacy if there's no claim. Not rocket science, but yeah. A denial, so I don't claim anything is true or untrue. So I don't make positive claims, I don't make negative claims. A questioning of the rejection and a dismissal of the question. Appeal to the stone is a logical fallacy that dismisses an argument as untrue or absurd. The dismissal is made by stating or reiterating that the argument is absurd without providing further argumentation. So, first of all, I never stated Craig was wrong. I actually did the opposite. I actually said that despite his mental disability, he could still be correct about the ultimate claim of the shape of the earth. So what I did was, not only was it not an appeal to the stone, it was actually as far as possible. It was the direct opposite of an appeal to the stone. I explicitly stated that he could still be correct despite the mental disability and the mental illness, or if he's acting, just his brilliant acting of going full retard. Whatever the case may be, I don't claim any of those are true or untrue. But whatever a lot of these theories are, he could still be correct despite that. Furthermore, I clearly provided further argumentation of why his construction was completely false. For example, hallucinating that you don't need controls, or hallucinating that observations are experiments, or all of this other nonsense that he did. The other fallacy Craig and all these other goofs spammed while they were counting their moments of illiteracy as fallacies for me was poisoning the well. The poisoning the well fallacy is a type of informal fallacy where adverse information about a target is preemptively presented to an audience with the intention of discrediting or ridiculing something that the target person is about to say. So in order to discredit, you're looking to damage credibility. So if I'm not even claiming, not only am I not claiming Craig is wrong, but I'm explicitly stating he could be correct about the conclusion. So again, it can't be poisoning the well. Making objective observations, like when a duck is quackling or waddling, that's not a poisoning the well fallacy. I mean, this stuff's not that hard to grasp, is it? I mean, it all goes back to the claim. Like if I was saying, oh, Craig's mentally disabled, so obviously his claim about the earth being a globe is false. That's poisoning the well. Or Craig can't tie his shoes, so he's wrong about the conclusion of the earth, without actually getting into any other arguments. That would be an example of poisoning the well. But these goofs are too clueless to realize that. I mean, I don't know how to dumb this down. Is it possible to dumb this down any further? What does everybody think? I mean, is there anybody that knows how to dumb this down? I mean, maybe it can be dumbed down further. I don't see how, but maybe other people do. LogicallyFallacious.com is a pretty good resource. Poisoning the well: to commit a preemptive ad hominem attack against an opponent. That is to, well, first of all, Craig's not my opponent. I'm doing an objective, logical, neutral analysis of a debate. Like, for example, if I was a flat earther claiming the flat earth was true and I took that side against Craig while doing the analysis, then I would be in a position to be able to even poison the well. I'm not even in the position to do that. That is to prime the audience with adverse info about the opponent from the start in an attempt to make your claim, now obviously I don't make any claims, more acceptable, or discount the credibility of your opponent's claim. Not only did I not discount the credibility of Craig's claim, I actually said he could still be correct. So I mean, again, this is so basic. Like, it's absolutely insane how Tutsaka still can't grasp this. Craig can't grasp it, or pretending not to. And all of these clueless people, they just can't grasp this. Like, I don't claim anything is true or untrue. I'm explicitly stating that Craig could be correct about his claim. So, logical form here, adverse info, be it true or false, about person one is presented. For example, Craig can't tie his shoes. Therefore, the claims of person one will be false. Whereas I did the opposite. I said Craig might not be able to tie his shoes. I actually didn't say whether he could or he couldn't. I said I'd be surprised if he could. He actually uploaded a video of him tying a shoe, which is very impressive. Very impressive. I mean, I don't know how insecure the poor guy has to be. Like, he was that insecure and that triggered. He actually had to upload a video of him tying a shoelace. I mean, any well adjusted, normal human who is confident in their ability to tie shoes would never even spend the time to prove other people wrong about their inability to tie their shoes. Like, for example, Craig wants me to debate him or whatever. I mean, if if a toddler challenges an adult to a full contact boxing or kickboxing match, I mean, first of all, the toddler might not even have the mental capacity to understand what's going to happen in that situation. And what kind of an adult would accept that invitation? What kind of an adult would accept that? And, like, Tsutsaka, if you think I'm the toddler in this, or whoever, or any of these goofs, what kind of an adult would even invite a toddler into a full contact boxing or kickboxing match? Like, morally, like, what kind of person would do that? So either way, there's something to think about here. And is an adult chicken or scared for not accepting a toddler's invitation to a full contact boxing or kickboxing match? I mean, this isn't hard to grasp. But anyway, so obviously, I didn't commit any poisoning the well fallacy. Not only that, I was as far from possible as committing this fallacy because I was explicitly stating that his claim could still be true despite all of these so-called ad homs, and they're not really ad homs, which we'll get into next. So we can go to Texas State University or any, I mean, these definitions are all pretty much the same everywhere. Ad hominem, this fallacy occurs when instead of addressing someone's argument or position, you irrelevantly attack the person or some aspect of the person who is making the argument. The fallacious attack can also be directed to membership in a group or institution. So, first of all, this is instead. So, for the people who don't know what the word instead means, which is surprisingly a lot of people, I mean, Craig clearly doesn't, Tutsaka doesn't. Tutsaka, you claimed that I was giving blatantly false information, etc., while all of these empirically verifiable definitions are literally on the screen. You made a lot of claims. Okay, instead is a substitute or equivalent. So clearly, instead does not mean in addition to. So, for example, if Craig does have a mental disability, if he doesn't know the basic definitions of words or what a control is, I had all of the definitions and the steps of the scientific method clearly on the screen, explicitly explaining all of these things. I didn't just state, oh, Craig's mentally disabled, argument dismissed, he's wrong about the conclusion. That's an ad hom. Calling him dumb or so-called subjectively perceived insults, they're not ad homs for two reasons. One, instead, if they have to be done instead of clear demonstration or further arguments. Instead, not in addition to. Well, a toddler questioning an adult's boxing technique. I mean, how much is that questioning worth to Saka? Like, you have to be at a certain level here. Again, definitions are on the screen. And then also, it has to be an irrelevant attack on the person or some aspect of the person who's making the argument. So if somebody's mentally disabled, that's not irrelevant because they don't have the mental capacity to comprehend either these definitions or what the argument they're attempting to make would or wouldn't mean in relation to the ultimate claim or conclusion. Like, for example, with LIGO, if Craig doesn't have the mental capacity, if he's too mentally weak to even comprehend that this data is injected data at LIGO or what it would mean for the conclusion, then it's not irrelevant to be discussing his mental disability. Like saying his fashion style is horrible, that's irrelevant. That would be irrelevant because it has nothing to do with the argument. But his mental disability is not only directly relevant to what's being discussed or his mental health spiral, it's relevant. And not only that, it wasn't instead of addressing any of these points or why they're fallacious, I clearly explained it all. I mean, obviously, these goofs hallucinate and pretend nothing was explained to soothe their dissonance, but I literally have all these empirically verifiable definitions on the screen. So does that clear up what an ad hom is or isn't? Simply calling a name calling is not an ad hom unless it's done instead of any other argumentation or is completely irrelevant. Miranda, it doesn't matter in relation to what? That they could still be correct about something? Because, yes, that's true. I say that all the time. Despite the mental disability, he could still be correct. So I know a lot of people like ChatGPT. Again, I'm not claiming anything about it. It's just there's certain basics here. I know Craig has pulled up ChatGPT on multiple occurrences. So just super simple. Craig mentioned many times, which would be considered, I believe, a super fallacy, which will get into the criteria for what should be a dinger or a super fallacy, in addition to regular fallacies and zingers in the current setup and structure of my logical analysis of debates. More simplified example of what? Somebody mentally disabled being correct about something? Or are you talking to Tutsaka? I mean, I can't figure out what Tutsaka's talking about half the time. Well, also explicitly stating that they could still be correct would be as far from logically fallacious as possible. So you can ask ChatGPT, is an observation the same thing as an experiment? Because Craig fallaciously claimed many times that an observation can be an experiment. So ChatGPT and pretty much anybody ever with even basic children's level comprehension says no, an observation and an experiment are not the same thing, although they are both critical components of the scientific method. For example, a wheel and an engine or transmission or a battery are all critical components of a car. But an engine is not the same thing as a wheel. A transmission is not the same thing as a battery. They might all be critical components, but they are not the same thing. So a wheel can't be a battery. A battery can't be a transmission. 1. Observation. This is the act of noticing and describing events or processes in a careful, orderly way. Observations can be qualitative, describing what is observed, or quantitative, involving measurements or numbers. Observations are used to formalize hypotheses. They are often the first step in the scientific process, where a scientist notices something interesting or unusual that leads to a question, not just randomly making predictions that if mail shows up in your mailbox, then Bigfoot must have brought it. Not the Mothman, not Chupacabra, not the human mailman, but it had to have been Bigfoot. And then if you go check the mailbox and the mail is there, that must mean Bigfoot brought it. So that's Craig of Fight the Flat Earth's so-called mental processes. That's all he's capable of, as he's proved many times. 2. Experiment. This is a more controlled process where a hypothesis is tested. In an experiment, a scientist manipulates one or more variables, the independent variables, and measures the effect of this manipulation on other variables, dependent variables. So let me say that one more time for the Dunning-Kruger crowd. And it's kind of crazy that Craig, like, he's even discussing science or anything, and he doesn't know these basics. I mean, these are children's level basics. They're literally on preschool worksheets. I'll put them on the screen in a little bit. They are literally on preschool worksheets. Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know. Yeah, math, I don't know what his deal is. I mean, I don't know. Maybe he's mentally disabled. He seems to have a lot of mental health issues, that's for sure. But I'll say it again. Experiment. This is a more controlled process where a hypothesis is tested. So you're not just waiting to observe. Like if the mail shows up in the mailbox, you're just waiting. And if it shows up, it has to be Bigfoot. That's not what an experiment is. It's a controlled process where a hypothesis is tested. In an experiment, a scientist manipulates one or more variables, independent variables, and measures the effect. Measures the effect of this manipulation on other variables, dependent variables. Experiments are designed to test the validity of a hypothesis and often involves a control group which doesn't receive the experimental treatment and an experimental group which does. Experiments are a way to gather empirical evidence and are central to the scientific method. Tutsaka, why don't you count how many times I said mentally disabled versus how many other words I used? It probably was less than 1% or 0.1%. I mean, I know that's what triggered you because it probably actively identified you. So that's pretty much all you could hear, and you clearly ignore everything else. But in summary, observation is about gathering data and noticing patterns or phenomena, whereas an experiment is about actively testing a hypothesis under controlled conditions. Both are important, but serve different roles in scientific inquiry. So I can't believe we even had to go over that. I mean, obviously, Tsutsaka doesn't understand percentages either, so it seems like he's as deficient in math as English. But if you can't focus, I mean, come on, Tsutsaka, you can do it. You can focus. We're cheering for you to get to the basic level, to at least get to a very, very basic level. So does everybody understand the basics? So we've gone over logic, logical fallacies. What is or isn't poisoning the well or appealing to the stone or an ad hom, or whether or not an observation itself can be an experiment. Obviously, it can't. So, is everybody good with all that? Because now what we're going to do, I want to refine the analysis system. Yes, Miranda, most people did. Most people did. I was actually surprised to learn that they're actually teaching this stuff in preschool. There's actually, I mean, I didn't learn the scientific method in preschool, but apparently there's preschool worksheets being handed out with this stuff. I'll put them on the screen in a little bit. Are you projecting that you're only 5 years old, Tsutsaka? Well, then, yeah, that's not too bad. I mean, you're still not that smart of a 5-year-old, but I mean, that's not horrible. If you're only five, I mean, I could see why, you could be having trouble with some of this stuff. Okay, so we're gonna review Craig's so-called debate against Caleb in real time and adjust for the new metrics. Now, before we do that, I want to establish new metrics. So we're going to be adding dingers and super fallacies. So we do have to thank Craig for, I mean, his so called debate was just, I mean, it was so bad that we have to have new metrics to accurately measure who is going to be the Dunning Kruger champ. Because as of right now, Michael Sartain is number one with the most fallacies. But should verbal diarrhea really determine Dunning Kruger champ status? Because Craig can spew fallacies like a faucet, but his faucet runs slower than, for example, Michael Sartain's. So theoretically, Craig could be a lot dumber than Sartain, especially if Sartain is smart enough to, or he has more cognitive function where he can spew fallacies at a quicker rate than Craig. But if Craig is actually even dumber and suffers even more from the Dunning Kruger effect, should Michael Sartain actually be the Dunning Kruger champ? So if we're for example, if this is a boxing match or a kickboxing match or an MMA bout, should the guy who had some pitter patter low power punches that did zero damage, let's say they threw 100, the other guy might have only thrown 20, but they were high power shots that he even had knockdowns. And the guy with 100 strikes had zero knockdowns and didn't even really do any damage. Are we really going to give the win to the guy who only won on volume? That's really the issue here. Or we can do the basketball example. If one guy's sinking threes the whole game and the other guy's doing layups, even if they made the same amount of shots, who's better? Who should get the crown? They obviously added the 3-point line in basketball at a certain point. So I don't think it invalidates the previous logical analyses of debates. We're just refining. I was trying to do part 3, but I mean, obviously it's very, very painful to go over this with Craig. So the metrics thus far that I'm suggesting, and everybody can chime in here to help with the framing of the new system, the refined system. I forgot who it was. They proposed dingers in addition to zingers. Breck, it's difficult for me to rate Caleb as a debater. Like if Michael Jordan just slam dunks against the toddler, I mean, are we really going to say Michael Jordan's awesome? I mean, he could be. Craig could be absolutely excellent. But we need to see him against somebody who's not a borderline vegetable. Because otherwise, how can we assess his skill? I was actually impressed. He obviously has done some studying. He baited Craig and completely decimated him with more skill than a lot of average debaters. So he's probably pretty good. It's just we can't really say that unless we see him against somebody, who at least has a basic preschool English level, because Craig doesn't. So, I mean, it's just very difficult to gauge how good Caleb is. But if I had to guess, just from certain moments, he seems pretty good. I mean, I didn't finish the debate, but so far he didn't lose his cool. He didn't get triggered. He didn't have mental health spirals like Craig was. So yeah, I mean, and he seemed to have at least the basic definitions down. So he seemed to be pretty good, if I had to guess. So to the metrics, zingers would be just incredible self owns. So dingers. So zingers are basically just exposing the other debater. Yeah, and What's it's the best I've ever seen. Yeah, I mean Caleb seemed to have gotten good really fast because he actually messaged me about fallacies and a lot of things. He was definitely more well versed. I also thought he was a lot young. He looks really young, so I thought he was incredibly young. So yeah, I mean, we don't have. I guess we don't have. How old was Witsit during his first debate? I don't know if we can have an apples to apples comparison, but yeah, Witsit's definitely the Michael Jordan of debate. So with zingers, it's basically dunking or a 3 point shot on somebody. It's exposing an opponent in a debate, either with a humorous point or just a destructive point, clearly demonstrating intellectual superiority. Overall, Witsit's the best. I've never seen anybody debate on any topic better than Witsit. So those would be dingers. And then I want to introduce super fallacies. So you have your garden variety fallacies, obviously, many different types of fallacies. But not all fallacies are equal. So, for example, Craig asking Caleb what he wants energy to be. So, I mean, that's a stack of two quote qui logical fallacies because Caleb asked Caleb asked Craig to define energy. What is energy? Craig responded. He didn't respond with, "Well, what do you think it is?" That would have been a standard fallacy. He responded, "What do you want it to be?" As if what Caleb wants or desires has anything to do with reality or science. I mean, it's just that level of bonkers would be a super fallacy. So, and then when Craig says an observation can be an experiment, that would be a super fallacy as well. And here's where it gets tricky because are we gonna stack super fallacies and dingers? Like, what would be the difference? Can a dinger also be a super fallacy? That's where it gets kind of tricky. It gets kind of tricky. And how much should these be weighted? Like, for example, if a super fallacy, is it going to count as a certain amount of fallacies, like 3 or 10 or 50? Or if it's a completely separate category, for example, a super fallacy could be like a knockdown blow in a boxing match, kickboxing match, or MMA bout. Like the guy wasn't finished off, but he got put down with a hard strike and then got back up. Is there going to be a separate category for super fallacies? And then it's going to get really tricky because if someone has, let's say Craig has 100 regular fallacies and 3 super fallacies, or maybe even 10 super fallacies, and someone else has 200 regular fallacies and 1 super fallacy, how are we going to crown the Dunning-Kruger champion in that situation? Anybody have any ideas? And then also zingers versus dingers. Yeah, math. I'm leaning to having super fallacy a separate category, but how is it going to be weighted? we got to figure that out as well. How is it going to be weighted? Anybody have any ideas on that? And then zingers, typically, they were just kind of, zingers are almost kind of like taunting the opponent. They're like taunts that make it more entertaining, but they don't necessarily impact the metrics. Unless, I guess, in the event of a draw, let's say two people have 100 fallacies, one of them has two zingers, the other one has one, then we would probably have to give the Dunning Kruger champ win to the guy with less zingers. So I would say zingers and maybe, see, I don't know, maybe zingers and dingers shouldn't enter the equation unless other things are equal. CF, have you seen the other breakdowns I did on debates, logical analysis? Michael Sartain's the current champ, but he's the champ on volume. And Craig has graciously brought to my attention just the sheer depths of goofery he sunk to against Caleb. He really illustrated the point that volume alone should not dictate Dunning-Kruger champion status. Because just because Sartain can spew thousands of fallacies faster than Craig, that doesn't mean he's suffering from the Dunning-Kruger effect greater than Craig is. In fact, the opposite might be true. Because if Craig is that mentally deficient, he wouldn't be able to even spew fallacies as fast as Sartain. So that's why we need to refine the system here with super fallacies versus fallacies and also dingers and zingers. So, okay. Heracles said 3-1. Is that on fallacy versus super fallacy? Well, if we want to go pure metrics, another possibility is that a dinger can add 10 regular fallacies to the fallacy count, whereas a zinger can remove 10 fallacies. That's another possibility. I don't know if that would be that accurate, though. Maybe we just need more categories. Or should zingers and dingers only be able to cancel each other out? Like if somebody has two zingers and they commit a dinger, are they left with one zinger? Or should there be a second metric scale on how it's all tabulated? Like, for example, if that's not clear, like, for example, let's say somebody has 100 fallacies, 10 zingers, and 10 dingers. So 100 fallacies could count as, let's say, if we're going lowest score wins, 100 fallacies could count as, let's say, -1 to make it simple. 10 zingers can count as +1, and a dinger could count as an additional -10. Lowest score wins the Dunning-Kruger championship. Heracles, what do you think about what I just said right now, just for the art of simplification? So no, they're not removed, they're just separate categories. So for example, 100 fallacies is going to give a score of, let's say, -1 or -10. A zinger gives a score of +1, and a dinger gives a score of -1, just to make it really simple. And lowest score wins the Dunning-Kruger championship. Because then we could weight the categories differently. Or is that just way too complicated for everybody? I mean, a lot of sports are complicated, though. Like, you know, it's not like we don't have to be super, super simple for the just for the sake of simplicity, because accuracy trumps simplicity. We want to be as accurate as possible. Anybody have any thoughts on what I just said? Having basically a dual metric system where 100 fallacies gives you either -1 or -10. A zinger gives you +1, and a dinger gives you -1. That way, you're kind of evaluating all categories. So, Heracles, you don't want to give specific weight against the fallacies themselves. Matt, I think we should have Sartain debate, Craig. They wouldn't. Well, would they even understand what each other was saying? I mean, it would just be verbal diarrhea across the board. And Sartain's way better at verbal diarrhea than Craig. I mean, Sartain and Destiny are better at verbal diarrhea than anybody I've ever seen. I mean, they're just masters of verbal diarrhea. CF, you like what? Counting 100 fallacies as a -1, and Zinger's +1, Dinger's -1 for final scores. I mean, I don't know if that it should be exactly that. That might not be the best way to do it. Maybe 100 fallacies will count as -10 or even negative. I mean, it's tough because you'd have to. How would committing a lot of fallacies, if they're standard fallacies, weigh against the dinger? Because if you commit a dinger against yourself, I mean, that's bad. That's like getting knocked down in a boxing match, so or a kickboxing match. So if you land 100 pitter patter strikes against an opponent, and the opponent only lands like one strike against you, but you get knocked down for a 9 count, who's going to win that round? They would usually give that round to the person that got knocked down, even if the guy that knocked him down only threw that single punch. Anybody have any thoughts on what I just said? I mean, that doesn't usually happen. Obvious, I don't know about one, but there are rounds where a guy throws maybe 10 or 20 strikes, gets a knockdown. The guy that got knocked down might have thrown 70, but didn't score a knockdown. So he would lose the round, even if he outscored the other guy on volume, but not on power shots. So that's what we're really trying to figure out here for the most accurate system to measure all of this. I mean, we can also get really crazy. So for people that are MMA fans, UFC rules versus Pride rules in Japan were completely different. So Pride rules heavily emphasized damage, and they gave more weight to the final round and the close of the fight than the beginning or middle of the fight. So, should there be some kind of subjective metric or somewhat subjective metric scoring the debate as a whole? Break it down into fallacy per topic ratio. I guess that would be the equivalent of scoring rounds, maybe, but then how do we differentiate which topic should have more weight? Yes, the knockdown punch wins the round. It gets tricky though, because if one of the boxers, let's say, lands 20 power shots and wobbles the other guy without knocking him down, the other guy whiffs on 100 punches and only lands one, but knocks the other guy down for an 8 count. I mean, if it's for a 1 count, that's different. But if he knocks him down for the 8 count, it's kind of tough. Like it gets really tough to score once you start trying to weigh the amount of power shots versus pitter patter shots. Yeah, 99% of the time, yes. So, Math, are you stating that a super fallacy, like how much weight should a super fallacy have, and then zingers or dingers? Because a dinger would almost be the equivalent of you tripping on your own foot, falling down, and knocking yourself out on the canvas, or giving yourself, let's say, a 7 count. That's what a dinger would be equivalently. So, what do you think about that? Because if you put your own self down, I mean, that's not nothing. We can't ignore that. That has to be factored in, right? I mean, that's different than just a slip, because a slip doesn't really mean anything. But if you slip and actually smash your head against the canvas, knocking yourself out for a substantial count, I mean, how is all that factored into the total fight? Yeah, so Heracles, what we're probably gonna do is have them all separate. So the only question is, how are they going to be weighted against each other? So I guess this is the final thing we're going to go over and try to figure this out before we actually go through and recalibrate this particular debate. So if someone has 100 fallacies, 10 super fallacies, and then somebody else has one regular fallacy, but 100 super, like how is that balanced? We need some kind of balance here, or just a total count. Like each fallacy counts as 1 point. A ding If what Math is saying, a dinger counts as 15 points, a super fallacy 20. That's pretty good. A zinger negative. I think a zinger should have negative 15, negative 15, because zingers and dingers are kind of parallel to each other. Because a zinger is an attack against a good shot against someone else, whereas a dinger is a shot against yourself. I think zingers and dingers should be able to cancel each other out. And a super fallacy 25, that's not bad, because if super fallacies are rare, those are like knockdown shots. Yeah, 2 or 5 times more than a regular fallacy is not enough. 25 is a pretty good number. Like I was thinking maybe even 50 or 100, but 25 might be better. It is very difficult a discussion where there is no one nail in the coffin type knockout shot. Well, I would say it's almost like you're pegging a nail through a coffin, like 25% into the coffin or 50% into the coffin, and then a zinger might be able to pry the nail out of the coffin a little bit, and then a dinger would put it back. So, if anybody else has any thoughts on this, 25 is pretty good. I think I might agree with Math here. Or should everything be balanced? Should a dinger be 25, a zinger be negative 25, and a super fallacy be 25 or 50? Maybe a super fallacy should be 50. Is the super fallacy rare with Craig? I mean, we're going to go over it. We're actually going to go over the first two parts of the mind shock analysis to get an accurate count. When he repeats, that's another thing we have to consider. When somebody repeats a regular fallacy, I count it again. If he repeats a super fallacy, like for example, an observation can be an experiment, I mean, that is so demonstrably false and silly. I would count that as a super fallacy. And so every time he repeats that, that would be a super fallacy. As far as rare, I would say yes. I think Craig only made maybe 5 different super fallacies. We'll go over it. But he repeated them a bunch of times. So I guess that would be similar to, let's say, just like, let's say, a right hook or an uppercut. It's the same knockout shot. The person should still get credit, even though if they're spamming the same type of shot, if it keeps knocking the other guy down, we obviously have to give credit, even if it's the same type of shot. So I suppose we should count even if he might only have 5 different super fallacies. If he keeps repeating them, we might have to count them every single time to be accurate. Same thing with the dinger. Now, I think the main question here, can a super fallacy be a dinger? If we make the distinction, like asking Caleb what he wants energy to be, I mean, that's one of the silliest things I've ever seen in any debate, so called debate. So we have to figure out if we're going to say a dinger can't also be a super fallacy, because technically it is. If you're committing a super fallacy, I mean, you're humiliating yourself massively. But for the sake of strict metrics, should we say, like, for example, a zinger theoretically can be the exposing of the opponent's fallacy, but not necessarily. A zinger could just be a good zinger, whether it's an insult or whatever. It's not directly in the fallacy category. So, should we say that zingers and dingers should be completely independent of fallacies? I'm not sure, because technically a zinger is the exposing of a fallacy as well. I mean, these are the important questions here, and I wanted the MindShock listeners' input. I know a lot of people are on different time zones, so some really big time listeners, they're not in here right now, and I know they're going to want to chime in. So, I mean, this is going to be a long stream because this analysis, the first 2 parts are probably about 4 hours, and we have to go through it. So hopefully they'll jump in as we get going. But does anybody have any other thoughts before we get started? Because we'll continue to figure out and refine it throughout the stream. So it's not like we have to, make complete conclusions right now, because we can continue to refine all of this. So any final thoughts before we get started? Bueller. Maybe my chat's frozen. CF seems to be highly entertained here. I mean, these are entertaining. I always say, like, flat Earth analyses are some of the best to just learn logic, because there's so much illogicality going on here. What do you mean by rolling score? Like continuing? Well, this whole thing was born out of me. I don't think it's fair to give Sartain the Dunning-Kruger crown if Craig, even if he commits less fallacies, if they're much dumber fallacies and he exhibits much more suffering from the Dunning-Kruger effect, he should win the Dunning-Kruger crown. We can't give it to Sartain. Yeah, we're gonna be doing the count as we're listening. I'll be stopping it to ask for input on what should or shouldn't be a super fallacy. The only other metric like I really want to use is a super fallacy can be either a single really, really dumb fallacy or a minimum of 3 regular fallacies stacked on top of each other. So a hat trick fallacy would automatically qualify for a super fallacy. So if you're making 3 basic fallacies, but you can make them in a single statement, I think that would be deserving of a super fallacy. All right, so let's get started. In on some live streams on my Caleb's got quite the fun.
We will. If you guys have questions that you want to have asked, if you send in a super chat on Rockfin or YouTube, we'll get to those by the end. So I believe they've already decided. Caleb, you're going first, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, it's all yours when you want, and you're going to be sharing your screen?
Yeah, give me 1 second here. Oh, I just that up.
And you guys can let me know if the audio volumes are good for everything. sometimes there's lag.
Just move some shit.
And if people are interested in debating on the show, you can go to t.me/debatism on Telegram. There's a group there, people throwing their names in the hat and saying what they want to debate, or you can email us at debatism@outlook and get you scheduled, or you can just go to jeranism.com/debatism if you have issues or questions about the format. Okay, Caleb, it's all yours. Go ahead.
Bet. Tonight we are going to be debating, is the Earth a level topographical plane, or is the Earth an oblate spheroid, ellipsoid, pear, as Neil deGrasse Tyson says? We're going to hopefully figure that out by the end of this debate. There we go. So what do our senses tell us? The default position is to assume that the Earth is flat because we feel no motion, simply because that's all we observe. We see a horizontal horizon no matter what altitude that we climb to. We feel no motion to the Earth, yet they claim we're moving over 1.2 million miles an hour through a vacuum. That cannot be substantiated due to the laws of thermodynamics and entropy. So this is the horizon. It's horizontal. It is an apparent location, not a geometric location necessitated by the radius and circumference claimed by the globe side.
Okay, so that's actually kind of curious. We're gonna have to go hasty generalization here because there are both people on the globe side and the flat side on both sides of this issue of geometric horizon, as in apparent versus true horizon. And this is actually a problem because it's actually kind of difficult to determine. I mean, on these subjects, I usually find it easiest to look at mirages, like Fata Morgana, where ships look like they're floating, because obviously where the horizon appears to be is not where it really is. Now, flat earthers seem to understand that aspect of it, whereas a lot of globe earthers, especially the ones that believe that ships go over the curvature of the earth and that's why you can't see them, completely ignoring the existence of waves. I mean, you really have goofs out there that think ships disappearing bottom up means something. I mean, waves obscure the bottom of any ship. Put a kayak in the water 2 feet in front of your face and the waves are going to obscure the bottom of the kayak, especially if the waves are big. It's kind of funny. I actually don't really listen to these back, but yeah, that was kind of funny what I said about the waves. It's a weird thing, yeah. I don't really understand why people would expect waves to not obscure the bottom of boats at great distances in the ocean when the waves are even bigger the further you go out. I mean, they could reach 30 feet high. So how would that not obscure the bottom of boats? I don't know. That's kind of weird. I've never seen anybody actually rebut that. They just get triggered. Is Toot Saka still here in the chat? I wonder if he has any thoughts on that. So obviously, I don't know if Craig here of Fight the Flat Earth is going to invoke that level of goofery. Obviously, other so-called globe earthers, scientists, and priests have done that in previous debates. So I don't know if they're going to do that. So yeah, this is definitely a hasty generalization because Caleb actually was pretty careful with the immediate opening where senses in default position. I mean, yeah, it's kind of hard to argue against. I mean, yeah, the word default, like what is the default? That's a tough one. I would probably, I mean, the burden of proof is on positive claims. So simply making no claim, I would consider that a default on not having a position. That's my default, at least, because anytime a claim is made, it must be backed up. If no claims are made, the burden of proof is not on you. So whoever's asserting a position or claim, burden of proof is obviously on them. But I wouldn't group all flat earthers or all globe earthers in any category. And Caleb did do that off the bat, but let's continue here.
So this is what you see. We will see the ground ramp up. All this water is flat here on the right, and the sky is ramping down. But because of an artifact of perspective, because our eyes are curved lenses, it ramps up and ramps down, creating an apparent location where the sky meets the ground.
Yeah, I mean, I would also add that it's not just the physical nature of the eye, but obviously precipitation, humidity, the conditions of the atmosphere or atmos, whatever you want to call it. You could still have an atmosphere around a flat Earth. Like if you're in a snow globe, technically it could be there could be a globe on the a half globe on the bottom too, and you'd still have it could be a near infinite plane that you're actually on. So it would be easier just to simply state this is the establishment model of a spheroid approximately 25,000 miles in circumference versus some kind of flat plane that is not a spheroid. But yeah, atmospheric conditions actually account for the difference between the apparent and true horizon.
Again, here's another picture demonstrating this. As these telephone poles get further away from us, they get lower in perspective due to the laws of perspective. A lot of globe earthers will necessitate that this is evidence that the Earth is a globe because things disappear from bottom up or appear from the top from the top to bottom when they're coming towards you. But this is just an artifact of perspective, suggesting that the Earth is flat and we are just curving hyperbolic space with our curved lenses that we call eyes. This is just a death blow to the heliocentric model right here. This is an old picture that has been shown by plenty and plenty of people. This is a 1-foot observer height, seeing a platform, an oil rig at over 9.41 miles away, necessitating that the Earth's radius be much more, by a factor of over like 15, much more than 3,959 that they claim that the Earth's radius is.
Oh, I like that he brought that up because obviously, as long as I don't know if he specified death blow to the establishment model, because obviously you could get a similar result, obviously depending on atmospheric conditions, if the Earth is a sphere and it's much larger. So that's a bonus point for Caleb there, because a lot of flat earthers simply think it can only be a spheroid of the alleged current dimensions pushed in the establishment, and it couldn't, for whatever reason, couldn't be anything else, which would have been a false dichotomy. But Caleb carefully avoided that there. So yeah, very good job, Caleb, there.
Let's hear from McToon himself about the horizon, and I'm going to be really interested to see what FTFE has to say about the horizon, whether it's physical, whether it's geometrical, because for us to claim that boats going over the horizon proves the Earth is a ball and it's not an artifact of a type of mirage or perspective, angular resolution, things like that. I would like to see, but let's hear what McToon has to say. I think he sets a very good example for this debate.
I don't think you shared with sound, sir.
No way. Whatever. We'll skip it. It's all good. Either way, he admits that the horizon is an apparent location that fluctuates based on atmospheric conditions and temperature differentials, which is reality. So you cannot say that any observation of the horizon necessitates that the Earth is curving or that the quadrillions of gallons of water are convexing around.
And just to stop this real quick, whoever asked me my opinion of Caleb at the beginning, I mean, he's clearly not a horrible debater because he seems to have researched enough of this to be well versed in what certain things would or wouldn't prove the shape of the Earth, which he clearly demonstrated here. Now, obviously, this is known that atmospheric conditions would impact. I mean, anybody who's seen a weather report with a visibility index should know this, but you actually still see globe earthers out there arguing that if the Earth were flat, you would be seeing Paris from New York or whatever.
On the Earth's surface. That's a begging the question fallacy. Anyway, long distance laser experiments conducted by FE Corps suggest that the Earth is flat. Plane surveying is a form of surveying which assumes that the Earth to be flat for up to 10 square miles. Sorry, not a. Oh, wait, it might be 100 square miles. Either way, I might be wrong on that. Marconi's successful propagation of a radio transmission over 2,000 miles across the ocean suggests that the Earth is flat. It was horizontally propagated, and globers, all they have to say is, oh, the ionosphere. Oh, it went up there and it bounced back down to the Earth. You just have to believe us. We have no empirical evidence to suggest this, but there's an ionized plasma part of the atmosphere which radio waves reflect back down to the Earth. Anyway, there's no evidence for that. All long distance observations made past the claimed radius and circumference of the globular Earth.
I don't remember if I actually explained why I gave Caleb the fallacy there, because there is evidence for bouncing off the ionosphere. Now, the exact nature, now, all evidence is not equal. Evidence itself can be simply, like, for example, eyewitness testimony can be evidence of something, but it doesn't mean the eyewitness testimony is accurate or true. And that could be for a variety of reasons, because the person's lying or the person is stating what they believe to be the truth, even if it isn't. So obviously, not all evidence is equal, but there have been tests and some kind of experiments in terms of bouncing something off something, whether it's the ionosphere or something else. It's not zero. There's something has been done in that area of research.
I'll suggest that the Earth is flat.
Okay, so that's quite the rabbit hole of which frequencies can bounce and off what. So, yeah, that's actually a tough one. And I don't know about no evidence. There is some evidence. I mean, they're bouncing signals off the moon. Is the moon okay, so that's another issue, because is the moon now within the Earth's atmosphere? Because the scientism cult, they keep changing that. So lately, it was reported that the moon is within the Earth's atmosphere. So it's kind of where the ionosphere exactly begins and ends is another question mark. And how is this all determined? So let's not rule out the possibility that certain wavelengths can be bounced off something. Now, whether you want to call it the ionosphere, whether you want to call it the dome, there might be some kind of bouncing possible. Obviously, it needs to be definitively proven, and there's so much conflicting information actually on that out there. So I think Caleb just went hasty generalization there again.
So either way, let's keep going. So I have 3 topics that I'd like to talk to Craig about today. I'd like to talk about the horizon and whether we can substantiate that the Earth is curved from looking at the horizon. I'd also like to talk about whether the Earth is in motion, up to him if we go down this route. But as we can see here, Michelson-Morley experiment, they expected a fringe shift to pick up the 30 kilometers per second assumed rotation or orbit around the sun. This conclusion, well, this is what he said after the experiment was done. This conclusion directly contradicts the explanation, which presupposes that the Earth moves. Every experiment in the history of mankind has substantiated this exact same statement, showing that the Earth is not in motion at all, not even 1 mile per hour. Here is a couple quotes.
Okay, hold on a second. So I also like that Caleb was basically quoting as opposed to saying that it has to have been a determined result. So it all depends on the ether. So basically, whether there is or isn't ether, and whether it was a true null result or not, it actually wasn't. They rounded it to null. So yeah, I went over this on some other podcasts. I'm not going to do a deep dive into it right now. But yeah, it hinges on a lot of the variables, and that when you have to go back to whether or not a scientific experiment, an alleged scientific experiment, is truly scientific, adhering to the scientific method and accounting for all variables.
Quotes from Einstein himself from the theory of relativity. For the question of whether or not the motion of Earth can be made perceptible in terrestrial experiments, we have already remarked in Section 5 that all attempts of this nature led to a negative result. Before the theory of relativity was put forward, it was difficult to become reconciled to this negative result. And then he also said, while I was thinking of this problem in my student years, I came to know the strange result of the Michelson experiment. Soon, I came to the conclusion that our idea about the motion of the Earth with respect to the ether is incorrect. If we admit Michelson's null result as a fact, this was the first path that led me to the special theory of relativity. Since then, I have come to believe that no motion of the Earth no motion of the Earth cannot be detected by any optical experiment. And then he assumes that we rotate around the sun, even though he just admitted that we can't make it perceptible in any optical experiment. Also, we cannot use the...
I actually want to take a moment here just to a quick explanation on why. Because keeping Mach's principle in mind, you would have to be outside, in order to have an objective viewpoint, you would have to be outside of what you're viewing. So, in order to determine whether the Earth goes around the Sun or the Sun goes around the Earth, you would have to be outside of the system and observe what the system does. Since we're in the system and we can't get outside the system, that's why it's kind of hard to determine what is going on because of that. So all the scientism goofs hallucinating that it's definitely proven and it can be proven and all that, they're just completely ignoring the very basics of physics.
Foucault's pendulum to suggest that the Earth is rotating on its axis, because we have relational mechanics here by Andre K.T. Assist, where he goes through all the physics, all the math to show that you cannot use it. The flattened figure of the Earth, or Foucault's pendulum, can no longer be utilized as proof of the Earth's real rotation. There's also something called the Machian principle, which I'm sure we'll go into, which Ernst Mach came up with, which assumed that if all of the universe is rotating around us at a central special location, that a translation of motion would be translated down to the Earth through the atmosphere and the ether, processing a pendulum.
Yeah, that's a great point, because what are you measuring? Are you measuring everything rotating around the Earth, as the cosmic background radiation suggests, which for some reason globe Earth proponents completely ignore the cosmic background radiation results? Very curious, of course. So yes, what is it measuring? And this all goes back to a fundamental misunderstanding of the basics of the scientific method. Is an experiment truly scientifically valid if you cannot clearly delineate dependent and independent variables and manipulate them against a control in order to test what is really going on? Is your result truly because of X reason or Y reason? How can you determine that for sure? And I've never actually seen anybody on the globe side or even on the flat earth side, other than Austin Whitsitt. Other than Austin, I'm not sure I've ever seen anybody bring this up. But we'll see if Caleb does, and we'll see how this is going to continue here. So far, there hasn't been any interruptions, so that's interesting. Real quick though, why do more people not talk about the cosmic background radiation? I don't know. Nobody wants to talk about that. It's kind of weird. Am I the only one bringing that up? Because scientism cultists believe the results of all of this, but they conveniently ignore all of the background radiation. It's kind of weird. I always found that kind of weird. And if someone does bring it up, they just completely hand wave it and move on to the next point.
Now, gravity. Gravity is the third topic that I'm excited to get into with Craig. We'll see how it goes. Is Einstein's theory of gravitation true, which is the current theory? So if you are defending gravity, you must defend the bending and warping of a fourth-dimensional fabric called space-time, creating gravity wells, creating orbits, and other insane things. So gravity, just for everybody in the audience, all the heliosexuals in the audience, gravity is a theory. Gravity is not a fact. And the law of gravitation is just a mathematical model that is consistent with a downward acceleration. That's it. So just to set the bias here, it's only a theory. It's not been proven. There's no substantial evidence to suggest that bendy, warpy space-time is a fabric that bends in the presence of large masses. Now, I want to go over the difference between Newtonian and Einsteinian just for the audience, because a lot of globers get this messed up. Newton theorized that gravitation is a result of mass acting on mass at infinite distances instantaneously. He had no time variable in his equations, so this must be assumed. This was a huge flaw in his theory, hence why we have Einstein come about.
And what a lot of people actually also don't address is that even Newton, if you look at his writings, I think I had this up on the screen. Obviously, Austin Whitsitt has brought this up as well. Even Newton didn't claim. He actually claimed that anybody who believes that mass would attract mass by virtue of mass alone wasn't of sound mind or mental faculty, or how he put it, which is actually curious. And all the scientism cultists worshiping at the Church of Relativity or whatever, they completely ignore all of this. It's quite curious.
About in 1915, which wrote the general theory of relativity, which explains gravitation as the fourth dimensional fabric called space-time, again, becoming warped in the presence of matter, creating gravity wells, causing planets and other celestial bodies to orbit. I'd like to read this quote from Nikola Tesla.
And yeah, just real quick regarding Einstein, if you haven't checked out Einstein's Relativity Debunked here on MindShock, I go over Run Z Cow's complete dismantling of Einstein's so-called theory, most of which he might have plagiarized anyway, as well as a couple other explanations for gravitational waves. And a lot of these experiments you can do yourself with magnets, so there's no need to grasp desperately in blind faith to the scientists and priests and lab coats, because the basics of physics, if you could usually demonstrate most of them with very, very simple experiments yourself.
Wonderful guy. I hold that space cannot be curved for the simple reason that it can have no properties. It might as well be said that God has properties. He has not, but only attributes, and these are of our own making. Of properties, we can only speak when dealing with matter filling the space. To say that in the presence of large bodies, space becomes curved is equivalent to stating that something can act upon nothing. I, for one, refuse to subscribe to such a view. Great guy. Great quote. Space doesn't exist. Also, though, this is another topic. The direct antecedent to gas pressure is a container. To have a contained gas pressure system with a PSI that's measurable, you have to have a container. So we cannot have our magical atmosphere that has a PSI coexisting next to the vacuum of space, which is 10 to the negative 17 torr. That not only defies all the laws of thermodynamics and entropy, but it defies common sense. This is what we see here. These two systems, without a barrier in between them, would be seeking equilibrium with each other violently. That's all that we see in nature. I would love to see one reproducible experiment other than just saying the atmosphere, like Globy McGlobeface did and all these other clowns on TikTok. We have to have a container to have a pressurized system. You cannot have a vacuum coexist next to a pressurized system.
And just real quick, for people who think that's an ad hom fallacy from Caleb, it's not, because he called them clowns, but then he explained why. So the so-called name calling was literally 1% of his argument. As we went over at the beginning of this, he didn't call them clowns instead of an argument. It was in addition to.
Without them seeking equilibrium violently. They don't just coexist next to each other while we shoot through a vacuum at 500,000 miles an hour, 4.9 billion miles a year. Anyway, conclusion. The Earth is not convexing away omnidirectionally from every observer on Earth. It is, in fact, a level topographical plane with hills and valleys. The Earth is stationary, as every experiment of the history of mankind has shown it to be. The vacuum of space cannot coexist next to the pressurized atmosphere due to the laws of thermodynamics, entropy, and common sense. And I will end there and let Craig do his presentation.
All righty. Thank you much.
No problem.
Craig, it's on you whenever you want to go.
And again, if anybody thinks I missed any fallacies for Caleb, now's the time. People say I'm biased or not objective. I counted every fallacy that I thought he committed. If it was inaccurate, feel free to cite them. Continuing on at Craig here. So we're going to keep the count in the chat. So I might have missed a few regular fallacies for Craig, but the point of this is to count super fallacies and dingers. So we'll be keeping track of that.
Craig, you're not on camera. There we go. You're on mute.
There we go. Sorry, I had myself muted, so I didn't make any noise as well. Caleb was talking.
Thank you.
Right. So, a lot of notes there from what Caleb said, but we'll discuss that after my points. Straight away, one of the things I want to talk about is the Foucault's pendulum. There is no evidence that suggests the Foucault's pendulum doesn't do what we suggest. In fact,
Okay, so just real quick, because a lot of people say this, that I don't explain each and every fallacy. That's true. Because if the guy makes shifting the burden of proof logical fallacy like Craig just did. There's no evidence that it doesn't do it. I mean, is that where the burden of proof is? So this fundamental failure to understand basic burden of proof. The burden of proof is on positive claims, not negative claims. So if he repeats it 10 times, I'm not going to stop the video and repeat it every single time. I mean, it would just be a 50-hour stream. So a lot of goofs criticize me for that, but I'm just not going to do it. It's the same thing with, let's say, zingers. If someone did the same exact zinger, I mean, I might not even pause it and point it out if it's fairly obvious. Again, this all goes back to there needs to be a minimum, I don't know, second grade level comprehension to listen to these debates and analyses. So if it's like riding a roller coaster. If you don't meet the criteria, if you're not at a certain height, or if you're not at a certain comprehension level, this isn't for you. So don't be crying that I don't stop every single fallacy and explain the same thing 5 million times. I think the original stream lagged here, so it might have cut the audio. Yes, it is also a straw man. And also just pure denial.
Caleb makes a very big thing about following the scientific method, even though there isn't just the scientific method. But if we want to talk about, say, the scientific...
What? There isn't just the scientific method? Well, nobody's saying the scientific method's the only concept in the history of existence. Well, what is this guy talking about? Or there isn't just the scientific method. Like, well, what does that mean? Does anybody know what that means? Like, if you're talking science, how can you be, if you're just grasping at faith and fallacy, that's scientism, not science. Science is a methodology. In order for it to be scientifically valid, how can it be scientifically valid without following the scientific method? I mean, it's kind of what a weird thing to say. I mean,
I don't think that's a super fallacy. Does that? I mean, it's kind of more in the medium category because so obviously that was a straw man, and you could even also say it was an etymological or no true Scotsman fallacy inversion of sorts, where he's kind of trying to manipulate definitions within the straw man to somehow suggest that Caleb was implying that science was absolutely the same thing as the scientific method, as opposed to the scientific method being a component of science. But I wouldn't count that as a super fallacy. And I think it would be making it too complicated if we had 3 different fallacies. Although I will say that for combat sports, there should be more than just strikes and significant strikes. Because there's light pitter-patter strikes that barely make contact. And then there's medium power strikes. And then there's high power significant strikes or power shots. So in combat sports, I think there should be 3 categories for strikes. But here, I think it might be unnecessary to add like mid-level fallacies, like low-level fallacy, mid-level. I think fallacies and super fallacies will suffice for now. But does anybody think that should have been a super fallacy? Because I don't think so. Yes, Heracles, that's funny. If you observe the mail in the mailbox according to your prediction that Bigfoot brought it, and if the mail shows up in the Bigfoot at the particular time of where you predicted it, that must mean your hypothesis of Bigfoot bringing it must be true. I mean, that's definitely a super fallacy. We'll get to that. But so nobody thinks that what Craig just uttered there was a super fallacy, right? If you observe what you think is a super fallacy or dinger, I wouldn't really call that a dinger either. That's just relatively standard goofery. That's standard goofery, regular fallacy, in my opinion.
After he set this kind of stage, making it clear that he's all about the scientism instead of the science, I mean, I guess there's, I mean, I don't know, man. This is gonna be rough.
Method we learn at high school, basic 5 steps, observation.
He only learned the scientific method in high school? What kind of special ed classes did this guy go through that he only got to the scientific method in high school? I mean, I guess that'd be explain a few things. I guess I'm a little surprised he even got to high school, but if it's all special ed, I mean, I guess that's, wow, this is rough.
Hypothesis, prediction, experiment, analysis.
Well, also, I wouldn't consider that a super fallacy either. Just because he was in special ed or whatever and he never got to the scientific method till high school, I wouldn't consider that a super fallacy or dinger. What does everybody think? I mean, look at his face. I mean, he's obviously not operating with a full deck. I mean, even if he is correct about the conclusion of the shape of the Earth, which I explicitly state he might be, because I don't make any claims. I don't claim anything is true or untrue. But I wouldn't consider that a dinger either. Does anybody want to give him a dinger for that? So far, I would just say those were just standard fallacies. No super fallacies, no dingers, no zingers. If anybody wants to count anything, just put it in the chat. If you think there's a super fallacy or a dinger or zinger, just throw it in the chat and I'll pause it and we'll discuss.
Repeat, etc., then.
Notice how he completely glossed over, or I guess he doesn't know about, the absolute basics in terms of testing with an experiment and what makes the experiment valid. Again, dependent variables, independent variables, and controls. Notice how he didn't talk about that at all. Now, is that on purpose because he's not being honest, or is he just in all his special ed classes, he never actually got to dependent, independent variables, and controls, so he doesn't know about them? Is that why he's always spamming these false cause and false dichotomy logical fallacies?
Again, for the people that I say I didn't list the fallacies, I just listed them. False cause, false dichotomy, and previously the straw man. If he just keeps using the same fallacies, obviously I'm not going to stop them every second. You mean dinger, Heracles? A zinger is scored against the opponent. So a dinger, it can be, is a self-owned. It's like a zinger against yourself. It does show bad thought process, but not astronomically bad. Not insanely bad. Like there's a lot of people that have, I don't want to say as bad, but similarly poor thought processes. I want to count dingers just on the really above and beyond moments. Like if you're having a drink, you would literally spit your drink out listening to that level of goofery. This is all still, I would say, mid-level goofery.
Man.
Foucault's pendulum follows that. So you can make an observation of anything, like the stars moving, in a particular pattern, or the sun going across the sky. That is a simple observation. You can form a hypothesis from that. You can either form a hypothesis of the stars and sun are moving, or you can form a hypothesis that we're moving. A hypothesis is just an educated guess. And then you can...
So the reason I didn't count all those as 5 different fallacies, which technically they could be, is because he didn't specifically direct them to a specific experiment. Because saying you can observe things is true. You can observe things. I mean, I guess I was giving him the benefit of the doubt. You could count all of those as individual fallacies if you wanted to. But again, I was giving him the benefit of the doubt. So maybe I'm not 100% objective. I mean, maybe I gave him a break here and he really should be at 11 fallacies, but he's not. So I don't know. Maybe I'm not really truly objective and I give people breaks when I shouldn't be. Maybe I did that here with Craig. I don't know. But again, still no super fallacies, no dingers yet, in my opinion.
Make a prediction based on your hypothesis. And if the hypothesis is that the Earth is rotating, then that's going to mean certain physical things are happening, like a Coriolis force being applied.
Oh, wow. So he started the fallacy stack early with all these circular reasoning, false cause, false dichotomy, logical fallacies. And again, is anybody surprised that this guy is just not mentioning dependent variables, and control?
So another thing, it's kind of, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of these troll goofs in here right now from Craig's channel, because they were saying I was giving him dingers for no logical fallacies for no reason without explaining them. I clearly just explained all of them. I named each one. I could have counted for more because he kind of umbrellaed a lot of the fallacies. I could have counted them individually and he would be up another 5, 6, or 7, but I didn't do that. And again, I don't think these are super fallacies simply because a lot of people don't understand the scientific method. It's not that shocking. And a lot of people misinterpret what they're reading, like he obviously did about Foucault's pendulum, again, due to not even understanding how the scientific method works. But again, I want to reserve super fallacies and dingers for just something that would make you spit your drink out. None of that would for me. I mean, maybe for somebody else, but I mean, I guess it would make you spit your drink out if you were at some kind of, let's say, scientific conference where people would be expected to know the scientific method. But on a random debate on the internet with random goofs, was there an expectation that Craig would know the scientific method? I mean, maybe, but I don't know. I guess that's all up to interpretation. The listeners can decide.
And the modulation of variables against the controls in order to prove your hypothesis true or false. Notice how he doesn't even mention it. Now, again, is that because he never got to it? So he only got to the scientific method in high school in his special ed classes. So he never actually learned about what a valid experiment is. Is that why he's saying that? I mean, I guess that would explain it. Or is he being intentionally dishonest? But why would anybody... I mean, I've posed this question before. Why would some of these globe earthers, like some of the biggest flat earth recruiters ever, like this guy, Craig...
And again, none of this is poisoning the well or appealing to the stone or any other fallacy, because I'm not claiming any of it is true. I'm going over many theories, a lot of them mutually exclusive. I'm not claiming they're true, and I'm not claiming Craig is wrong about his conclusion. So clearly, none of these are logical fallacies, and as far from possible as being appealing to the stone or poisoning the well fallacy.
The flat earth, he's probably made a lot more flat earthers than any other flat earther through his silly defenses here. But why would he humiliate himself like this on purpose if he was intellectually dishonest? Unless we go down the rabbit hole, this is all a psyop. He's getting paid money by the CIA to humiliate himself like this, and he doesn't have any self-esteem, so he's accepting the money, so he doesn't care if he looks like a complete and utter goof. But if he is being honest and he simply has a mental disability and people are just indulging him and allowing him to humiliate himself by performing in these debates, I mean, that's kind of sad. I mean, that's definitely kind of sad. But again, yeah, notice how there's no mention of dependent variables, independent variables, or controls.
And if that's the case, then we can make predictions, which would be the next step in the scientific method. And the predictions is that if we have a...
That was for a generic explanation for science, not the scientific method. Or the scientific method, as long as it follows certain steps. I think you're talking about the Whitehead debate, Tim Snake. Heracles, there are people. Well, that's insane. I mean, this was the biggest loss I've ever seen in any debate. So I really don't know how anybody who has any cognitive function can think Craig so-called won this. I mean, obviously, if Craig is some kind of mentally disabled individual on the level of a 4 or 3-year-old, even when they get obliterated, they'll pretend they won and celebrate because, a toddler brain is not the same thing as a fully formed adult brain.
Pendulum swinging from a point attached to a pivot point, then depending on where it is on Earth, as it swings, it will drift a different amount.
And that was a fallacy. If I didn't explain it here, you'd have to verify where you were on Earth in reference to elsewhere. Again, with the House of Cards, it's all presupposition. Like, for example, it's like, depending on where you are in Narnia, well, if you haven't established the borders of Narnia, I mean, you're just building a house of cards. Welcome, Brody. Yeah, we're pretty chill here. We don't hate on anybody, as long as you're civil. we deal with empirically verifiable definitions, and feel free to ask any questions.
And would that amount be the same if the Earth was stationary and everything was going around the Earth? Again, going back to dependent and dependent variables and controls, which this guy either doesn't know about or is intentionally not bringing them up if he's dishonest. I mean, this ain't rocket science here. I mean, this is simple stuff, but unfortunately, you see the same thing in all these flat Earth debates where the scientism cultists, they never actually talk about real science and what separates a valid scientific experiment from an invalid one.
And for those who think calling people scientism cultists is a fallacy, either poisoning the well or ad hom or whatever, clearly it's not, because I gave the argument there, the difference between science, scientism, etc. And I'm not even claiming that the scientism cultists are wrong about their conclusions or claims. So to call someone a scientism cultist wouldn't be fallacious, again, if you're not claiming they're wrong about the conclusion and if you clearly explain why. Just like if you're explaining your objective observations of a duck waddling and quacking while calling them a duck, that's not a fallacy.
And this is an experiment that you can do, that you can test yourself.
Again, what are you testing, and how do you know you're testing what you think you're testing? And if you're wrong, how would it look like otherwise? And how do you know that for sure?
Okay, so here's our first question. Is that a super fallacy? Test it yourself. So we're talking false cause logical fallacy, because if you don't have the variables and the control, you don't know what you're testing. We're talking reductive logical fallacy, because if you're ignoring all these other variables, electromagnetic or otherwise, that's another fallacy. And you could even argue that you can rope in, even though he doesn't say it right this second, but he's going to say it in a little bit, that anybody can do it. You can do it, and then it's done so many times by so many different people. That would be an appeal to popularity logical fallacy. Not to mention, you could also argue it's also a post hoc logical fallacy. So would that be our first super fallacy with a hat trick fallacy or greater? What does everybody think? After clearly demonstrating he doesn't understand what controls are, and then he stacked all the fallacies of false cause, reductive logical fallacies, post hoc, and appeal to popularity. So Heracles votes for that being our first super fallacy. Also, if we count it as a super fallacy, are we going to subtract from the regular fallacy? That's only fair, because if a super fallacy counts as 3 fallacies, if we kept the regular fallacy count, then it would count for 4. or actually, we haven't said how many it counts for. A super fallacy should count for 25 fallacies. But then they probably shouldn't also get a single regular fallacy. What does everybody think? How are we going to determine this? So we're at maybe one super fallacy for Craig. I'm not going to do the overlay on this one because we might end up changing it. So we're just going to keep track in the chat. I have another window up where I'm keeping track. So Craig's 10th regular fallacy might have been one super fallacy. And at the end, we'll kind of figure out how much everything should count for what. Because we'll probably have a lot more people in here ones that are in the other time zones. Okay, so maybe Craig has committed one super fallacy on his 10th fallacy.
Against being right. That's where modulating the variables comes into play, which this guy doesn't know anything about, apparently.
I did it when I was at university. In fact, so does every physics undergraduate, and uses it to actually calculate your position on Earth.
Okay, was that a second super fallacy? Because I counted the 3, obviously, for the ones that I just went over. This is tough. Theoretically, we can count all 3 of them as super fallacies because they built on the other super fallacy. Yeah, this is tough. This is tough. Is math still in here? What do you think? I messaged Caleb that we were doing this as well, and I think Craig knows too. I think I dropped the link in Craig's thread of him having meltdowns earlier today on Twitter like he regularly does. Yeah, we need more feedback here. I mean, Heracles is pretty on point. Him Snake, what do you think? You've been around a while. Or did you just get here and you didn't hear us talking about super fallacies? Hello, Sarah. Did you just get here? We're developing a new system for analyzing debates. So we're adding super fallacies where if someone commits a hat trick of fallacies, like 3 fallacies in a single statement, that's going to count as a super fallacy. And super fallacies might have the same weight as, let's say, one super fallacy could be 25 regular fallacies. But you don't need a hat trick fallacy to be a super fallacy. Because if you say something that's just so fallacious, like literally making someone spit their drink out, that would count as a super fallacy. So we're trying to determine, Craig here was saying that anybody can do an experiment with Foucault's pendulum while failing to clearly delineate what the independent, dependent variables and controls would be in such an experiment, and presupposing where on earth you would be while doing this so-called experiment relative to other places. Like if someone said, depending on where you are in Narnia versus Atlantis, then you can see how Foucault's pendulum is true. So this kind of fallacy stack of false dichotomies, reductive logical fallacies, I don't know what to do here. Should we give him 3 additional super fallacies, which would bring him to 4 super fallacies and only 9 regular fallacies? That's the question. Him Snake, are you still in here? What do you think? You seem to think you're pretty well versed in fallacies, which you might be. Nobody has any thoughts. I think maybe we should be very selective with the super fallacies. Maybe not give, because if you already spit your drink out at the goofery, you'd have to up the ante of goofery in order to get someone to spit their drink out again. Yeah, kill the bank. We're going to review all this at the end as well because we talked about it at the beginning and we're still kind of trying to figure out how they should be weighted. So for now, we'll just worry about what is or isn't a super fallacy, and then at the end, we'll kind of try to determine how much should they be worth. No problem, Neil. There's quite a few. I actually intentionally avoid calling out dozens of fallacies just because they're kind of complicated, and I don't believe in overcomplicating things. Like, let's keep it as simple as possible. But basically, a false cause logical fallacy would be stating, like, if the result of Foucault's pendulum is this movement, it can only be caused by Coriolis, if Coriolis is even real. A false cause would mean, like, let's say the true effect is caused by some kind of electromagnetic factor. A false cause would be pretending it can only be caused by Coriolis. Or in a false dichotomy situation, you would claim it's either electromagnetic or Coriolis and it can't be anything else. That is also a false cause. So a lot of different fallacies here. And post hoc is a little bit more generic, where basically after an event, you're assuming that the occurrence, whatever happened, had to have been a direct relationship with the event that happened after. It is related to false cause and can also overlap reductive logical fallacies. A reductive logical fallacy is basically oversimplifying something that shouldn't be oversimplified. For example, we know that electric forces exist in the world and the universe. There's a whole bunch of different forces. So pretending that gravity could be the only one would be a reductive logical fallacy. You're reducing an argument, ignoring a lot of variables. They're all related. A lot of these fallacies overlap each other, which is why I wanted to introduce the super fallacy. If you're hitting at least 3 fallacies with a single statement, it would be a super fallacy. Or even if it's only one fallacy, but the level of goofery is so above and beyond the usual, like, for example, causing you to spit your drink out, that would also be a super fallacy. So let's leave it at this. Craig's 10th fallacy might have been a super fallacy, so he's at 1 super fallacy, and we're not going to count these subsequent fallacies, even though he's talking about the same thing as super fallacies.
Oh, wow. Appeal to popularity and appeal to authority. He's rolling those. I mean, this guy came out the gate like a faucet with the fallacies. Like a faucet.
It's very, very, very simple. This isn't me because I didn't record my physics degree.
And that's also a reductive logical fallacy by claiming something is much simpler than it is. And he rolled those into the black and white logical fallacies or false dichotomies where it can only be this. I mean, again, like, this guy's got a pretty impressive stream of fallacies going.
20 odd years ago. This is a guy on YouTube called the Gentleman Physicist. And he built his own Foucault's pendulum in a high-rise building. And he let it swing for a certain amount of time. And over that amount of time, it drifted a certain amount of time.
What drifted? And how do you know that's what drifted as opposed to something else? Again, notice how none of this is ever addressed by the side of the scientism cultists.
There were 41 minutes, it drifted, and you could measure the angle of the drift, do some basic math, figure out how much it would rotate in 24 hours, and then you can actually use that and calculate your latitude on Earth. So with nothing but a swinging pendulum, you can use the degree of the angle that it drifts to find your latitude on Earth.
And again, how if the Earth was completely stationary, would that look different?
And it works. The fact that it works, the fact that you can physically do this, it's a repeatable experiment. The fact that this can be repeated anywhere in the world by anyone with the right equipment, set up the correct way, you will be able to calculate your latitude on the planet.
Again, false cause logical fallacy, circular reasoning logical fallacy, fundamental lack of understanding of the basics of the scientific method.
Brody, that's okay. You can give your opinion. What do you got? We're all just here trying to make a more optimized system of logical analysis of debates. Was your opinion on what's being talked about or the system we're developing? Either or, you could still give your opinion.
I mean, we're talking absolute basics here, and this goof doesn't even have them down. I mean, literally the absolute last person you would want discussing anything like this. I mean, again, if he has some kind of fetish for humiliating himself, then this does make sense.
And that shows that it matches the predictions of the hypothesis following on from the observation, that based on the position on Earth, different Coriolis forces will be applied to a Foucault's pendulum.
And again, we've gone over the whole prediction nonsense many, many times. I mean, just because the Mayans all predicted the eclipses thousands of years into the future with their flat Earth cosmology, with their geocentric flat Earth cosmology, that doesn't mean their model's true. Just like psychics who, let's say I mean, we don't know whether they have psychic powers or not, but just because they accurately solve many cases, and for the clueless goofs who think they didn't, I mean, check out the MINDSHOCK podcast on psychics that solve cases. I went over dozens and dozens of cases. Now, that doesn't mean they did it by way of psychic powers. They may have guessed, they may have insider info from police, but the bottom line is hallucinating that prediction is equal to truth. I mean, this is a classic scientism hallucination. Only the most clueless of goofs go by predictions because, you know, anybody can make a prediction. Whether or not something matches, especially when you don't have controls, independent variables and dependent variables clearly delineated, which this goof doesn't even mention. That's how you know he's completely and utterly clueless.
And you can use Foucault's sine law, which is latitude equals arc sine divided by times 24 hours divided by t. And then you find out your latitude on Earth. And they got 49.8, which was about within 1.4 degrees of.
And again, a lot of these things, they're also circular reasoning fallacies. Because, you know, depending on where you are in Narnia, I mean, you haven't proved Narnia in the first place. So these are also, he just keeps spamming these circular reasoning logical fallacies. So, by the way, does anybody want to count anything that Craig just said as a super fallacy? Because he kind of just repeated the same basic fallacies. I wouldn't spit my drink out at the level of goofery of any of the fallacies that he just streamed through. He just did like 11 in a row or whatever. So, well, if Caleb commits a fallacy, if you think I missed a couple, call him out, Tutsaka. But yeah, so far Craig has one super fallacy, and if we're not also counting that as a regular fallacy, he'd be at 32 fallacies and one super fallacy. If anybody thinks that's an error, or they think anything that Craig just said should be counted as a super fallacy, feel free to chime in.
Where they are, which was pretty damn good considering the crude equipment used.
And would it be any different if it was simply the vault of the heavens circulating above. How would it be different? And you never hear any of these clueless scientism goofs discussing this, because then they'd actually have to address their blind faith in religion and scientism. And they would actually have to understand the scientific method, which they don't appear to, at least not the flat earth debates that we've seen. Unless, of course, we're gonna, those that believe that this guy's just playing stupid. He actually does know the scientific method. He knows he's completely full of it, and he doesn't care because he's just a shill and he's getting paid. He's getting compensated so well, he doesn't care that he's humiliating himself to this level. There are people out there, I mean, they'll do anything for money. I mean, even worse things than humiliating themselves with words. I mean, there's people in various industries just doing depraved things for money. So it's not a surprise that people do that, but for those that believe he actually isn't mentally disabled and he does have some kind of mental competency, I suppose that is an option. I'm not going to fall for false dichotomies myself. I don't really know which category this guy goes into. I don't know him personally.
And that's called
I clearly just said I don't know if that's true, Tsutsaka. Asking a question is not a claim. Again, do you just like humiliating yourself, proving you're not even on a preschool English level? Like, I gotta feel bad a little bit for Tsutsaka.
a margin of error. So the fact that this experiment can be repeated constantly on different positions on Earth. There's experiments recorded on in the South Pole where they did this, and you get the expected 24 hours showing 360 degrees rotation.
Man, this guy stacks fallacies with the best of them. I mean, I'm actually getting kind of impressed here with the flow of fallacies. I mean, how quickly he just stacked those circular reasoning, false dichotomies, and false cause fallacies on top of each other so quickly. I mean, I have to say, I was a little bit impressed there by that stream of fallacies. Quite impressive.
But again, I wouldn't count any of those as super fallacies because, again, they wouldn't cause someone to spit their drink out. I mean, is that the best way to explain it? A super fallacy would cause anybody with at least some kind of functioning brain to spit their drink out. So just one super fallacy for Craig thus far, and I wouldn't say any of those were dingers specifically either. They were just pretty classic fallacies that you would expect to see in any debate with the goof trying to defend the globe who doesn't understand the scientific method. If Heracles or if anybody, if you think I missed something that could be a super fallacy or a dinger, just feel free to call it out at any time.
I don't know if he's going to break Sartain's record. I mean, the champ's the champ for a reason, but we'll see.
The fact that it is a repeatable experiment matching the predictions shows that it fails to falsify that the Earth is a rotating globe. The Foucault's pendulum experiment is great because it doesn't only show that we're rotating, but based on the Coriolis forces at different points, you can map out the forces and the vectors, and you find that shows in itself that the Earth is also a globe as well as it being rotating.
Notice he didn't say how it showed that. He just did his verbal diarrhea stream of fallacies and demonstrating he doesn't understand dependent variables, independent variables, and controls. He doesn't understand false cause logical fallacies, false dichotomies, or circular reasoning logical fallacies. If he did, his presentation would look absolutely nothing like this.
Everything, or simply just each false cause, false dichotomy, post hoc, and reductive logical fallacy, which he just committed? Was I supposed to not count them? Just because you're triggered, Tsutsaka?
I mean, that's if there's a key takeaway point here for all of the objective listeners here who don't even care necessarily about the shape of the Earth, they just care about logical argumentation. That's the main point here. So regardless of whether he's correct or incorrect about the conclusion of the shape of the Earth, his so-called argument would look absolutely nothing like this if he had even a basic understanding of the scientific method and logic and reason.
Other ways that we can figure out that the Earth is a globe is surveying. And one of the things they do in surveying is something called measuring reciprocal zenith angles. So the zenith angle directly above you, 90 degrees, is your zenith, okay? And if you set up two plumb bobs or theodolites at a different distance apart, you can see if those two plumb bobs are on the theodolites pointing straight up at your zenith are matching. If they point straight at each other and you measure the angles, if the Earth is flat, then you would get.
Well, of course it would sound like that to you, Tutsaka, because if you're not even on a preschool English level and you don't understand logic or logical fallacies and you're too triggered, then it would sound exactly like that to you. So you're just pretending Craig was dinged because other people don't understand something or don't care because you don't understand what logic or logical fallacies are. I actually explained this at the beginning of the stream so you can have your tutor. I think you were here for that. No surprise you didn't comprehend it. But if you get a tutor, they can help explain it to you. You're beyond everybody's level of Dunning-Kruger. That's for sure, chump. Man, your subconscious really loves exposing you here. We always like Dunning-Kruger examples here. Further proves the point. So again, I don't think any of those were super fallacies for Craig. I mean, they were just pretty standard. I mean, they're probably worse than standard, but nothing that would rise to the level of a super fallacy.
At 180 degrees. If the Earth is a globe, you would get more than 180 degrees.
Wow. I have to say that was impressive. That was one of the dumbest things I have ever heard on any flat earth debate. I'm actually getting kind of impressed with this guy. I mean, he's sinking to new lows that he might be able to compete with Sartain. I was so skeptical at the onset of this, but I don't know. Maybe his verbal diarrhea is obviously not as good as Sartain. Sartain can spew with the best of them. Like Sartain and Destiny, I mean, these guys are masters of verbal diarrhea, of just spewing fallacies in such rapid succession. I don't know. This guy doesn't seem to be as good. But the level of gopher he just sunk to at that point is so curious. I mean, it's just astounding.
And the reciprocal zenith angles, I think I go over all that in part 2, so I'm not going to do it again right here. Obviously, he's presupposing variables for that and distances. So, but again, I don't think, even though that was really dumb, I wouldn't call it a super fallacy. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's up to interpretation. What does everybody think? Like, for example, let's say the Earth is a flat plane with a convex surface like the lens of an eye. So the reciprocal zenith angles could still demonstrate. Well, there's a lot of problems here. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt here. I'm steel manning his argument. Let's assume all the hallucinations match up. Let's assume that. So if the surface is just this plane that has a convex lens on top of it, like, or even a snow globe type shape, let's say that's the model of the Earth. The reciprocal zenith angles, even if they demonstrate that there could be a curvature, how does that prove a sphere as opposed to a plane with a convex surface? That could be a super fallacy. What does everybody think? I don't know. That one I'm on the fence about. I'm on the fence about that. Does anybody think pretending that a convex surface has to prove sphere is a super fallacy? All right, so let's count it as a maybe. So Craig's 10th fallacy was a super fallacy, and his 50 to 52nd fallacy could be a second super fallacy. So with the revised, well, it's not even close to the dumbest thing he has said, but it could still possibly qualify for a super fallacy. like not comprehending that a convex surface with a wide variation in features can only be a sphere. I mean, that's pretty dumb. That is, it's not the dumbest, but it's pretty dumb. I mean, I don't know. Do you guys want to do a vote? Who wants to count that as a super fallacy? So Tiffany says yes. Heracles is maybe. Neil, what do you mean by pair? Oh, like the two? No, I just don't remember exactly when he said that. So he either said it as his 50th, 51st, or 52nd fallacy. So if we count two, pear-shaped Earth, it doesn't really matter because what he's not comprehending is a flat plane can still have a convex surface. And obviously he's presupposing a lot of distances for that zenith angle. But even if we pretend he's not, a convex surface does not prove a sphere or a pear or some kind of cube with curve, whatever, dodecahedron, or it doesn't prove any of that. So Tiffany votes yes. I vote yes. Heracles is undecided. So I'm going to put that in the maybe category and we will re-examine at the end. So Craig has possibly 2 super fallacies and that would bring his regular fallacy count to 50. CF votes yes. So it'll be yes for now.
Like, I might have to fall for a logical fallacy myself here and appeal to incredulity. Because I'm not finding it difficult, and again, I'm admitting my fallacy here. I'm finding it difficult to believe this guy is not mentally disabled. Because who would think that? So regardless of the shape, flat or globe, obviously, the surface would not be perfectly 180. In either model. I mean, small children can understand.
Actually, it wouldn't, Tutsaka. Like, for example, if you have a convex surface and you put a lake in the middle of it, the lake would still be flat, even though the land was convexing around it. No surprise you couldn't grasp that.
In this. I mean, there are mountains, there are valleys. I mean, even something appearing to be perfectly flat, obviously it's not going to be perfectly 180 degrees flat. Even if it's looks like a perfectly flat plateau, it's not going to be to the degree completely perfectly 180. So is false dichotomy, false cause, circular reasoning nonsense stack here of fallacies? I mean, on one hand, he keeps spamming the same logical fallacy stack. And I'm sure he's not going to randomly stop. So we're probably going to be dealing with the same stack, which, I don't know, that might be disappointing just because I do like variety in the fallacies. Like Bryant Myers, I mean, he had quite the variety, and to a lesser extent, Sartain. This guy, I mean, it's the same stack he's been spamming since the beginning. And just not even a children's level. I mean, we're talking common sense here. I mean, just knowing that the existence of mountains and valleys and all of these things, I mean, even a desert, even a plateau, it's not going to be perfectly 180 degrees across miles and miles and miles. The Earth does not have an even surface, regardless of whether it would be a globe, whether it be a flat plane, or whatever model. In no model. Like, the only thing I know the motto of the podcast is the only thing we know for sure is that we don't know anything for sure. But we're not even really sure about that, though, because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, any logical MindShock listeners out there, any model of the Earth would not have a 180 degree flat surface across great distances, regardless of the shape. So you can say that water always finds its level, etc., but the land around the water, and he's talking about land surveying here, unless I misunderstood what he said. Are there water surveyors out there? I mean, I'm not aware of people surveying the ocean. If that's what he's talking about, he didn't specify. As far as land surveyors, I mean,
Yeah, Neil, but the salt flats aren't the majority of the Earth. That's what I was referring to, like extremely great distances.
I don't think there are any flat earthers out there arguing that the Earth is a perfectly even surface. And I don't think that there are any globe earthers arguing that. And I don't think that there are any concave earthers or realm earthers or any other type of earthers. I mean, even if this is all a holographic projection video game, it's still clearly not a 180-degree surface across great land distances. So we have, I mean, this is a point, I mean, I don't know if I've ever seen anyone sink this long.
But to your point, Neil, across an Earth that was 25,000 miles in circumference, the salt flats, there should still have been at least 1 or 2 degrees of curvature across the entire salt flat, possibly more. So that's still good evidence that the sphere of if the Earth were a sphere, it would probably have to be bigger to explain away the salt flats, unless there's some other kind of optical phenomena going on.
Oh, as this Craig goof just did. I mean, that's impressive. I know I'm kind of spending a lot of time on this. I'm impressed by the level of goofery he sung to, because that's possibly the dumbest point. I mean, we might have to make a podcast where we go 10 dumbest points made in flat earth debates, either by flat earthers, globe earthers, whoever. I mean, that's simply the dumbest point I've ever heard. Not to mention that there are land surveys.
I had no idea what was coming later in the debate when I said that about Craig's fallacy here. I was not prepared for the levels of gopher. I mean, it's like the floor dropped out multiple times after this moment. So, yeah.
Who are flat earthers. So again, that would be an appeal to authority or genetic logical fallacy, or even you could say a credential fallacy if you want some kind of credentialed, licensed land surveyors. Because like most things, there are people on both sides. Now, there might not be a lot of flat earth surveyors. I mean, I think I only saw 1 or 2. I mean, was there more than 1 or 2? I don't know, but it's irrelevant because they were land surveyors and they do this. So clearly it doesn't prove what this goof is hallucinating. It proves in either direction.
And I don't have the page up. Give me 1 sec. If you go to mctoon.net and go to main surveyor, and I know Caleb likes likes mctoon. They had a couple of good conversations. Give me 1 sec. I'll get that screen up. So the main surveyor and a couple of other qualified surveyors, Walter Bislan and Jesse Kozlowski, did their own measurements to check if reciprocal zenith angles is a thing. Here's a diagram explaining what they do. So if the Earth is flat, then these angles will sum up to 180. If the Earth is a globe, then there'd be more than 180. And the main surveyor went out and did a bunch of measurements of different elevations, following all the correct surveying methods. The survey determined that all the sum of the reciprocal zenith angles came to more than 180 degrees, which would say that the surface of the Earth is not flat, it is in fact curved. You can go and look at all the details of the survey.
I mean, again, even if the Earth is just some large flat plane, it's still so-called curved, uneven surface. Why would it be expected to be flat? And notice how the goof doesn't actually explain how it would prove any of this, because obviously it wouldn't. None of these goofs ever go into the details of how it would prove that. They avoid dependent variables, independent variables, and controls like the plague. I mean, you'll never hear these goofs talk about, at least, I mean, maybe you would. Maybe in some debates they do. I mean, I've been sent dozens and dozens of debates. I have never seen a false cause logical fallacy
reductive logical fallacy and false dichotomy logical fallacy, as well as a post hoc logical fallacy, are fallacies. If you didn't understand how they're fallacies relative to Craig claiming the surveyor would prove this, that's your incomprehension. I just went into explicit detail. If you understood what a false cause logical fallacy and a reductive logical fallacy was, like a flat plane with a convex surface would give the same result. I mean, if you're mentally disabled, I guess you can't comprehend that. But you take a beach ball and a large half globe, put them next to each other, and measure the zenith angles. You would get the same result. It doesn't prove a globe just because there's a convex surface. He's also strawmanning in terms of building an inaccurate model of a flat Earth to disprove it, but it doesn't even disprove that either. So just because you didn't understand the details or the fallacies, I mean, I don't know how I could dumb that down further. I don't know if it's possible, which is why Tsutsaka should probably get a tutor instead of humiliating himself further.
Birther address these points, and most flat earthers don't either, to be fair. The smart ones do. I mean, Austin Whitsitt, of course. I mean, this guy's a master debater. I mean, this guy's one of the most logical individuals out there. I mean, forget the topic. Don't even care which topic he's arguing. I mean, this guy has logic down extremely well. I think he's better than me. I mean, a lot of MindShock listeners actually don't think so, but that's just my opinion, which I don't even think is that humble. I'm just looking at it. I mean, this guy's like an encyclopedia of logic, physics, and history. And so he's obviously talked about it. I'm not sure how many other, there might have been one or two other flat earthers who did talk about that and modulating the variables so you would know what it would look like with different conclusions. Clearly that has not been done here. Clearly this Craig goof has no idea about any of it. We will see if Caleb addresses any of this.
At your leisure, that all his logbooks are here detailing all the measurements that he did. And the outcome of the survey was that there is a deviation of 1.4 degrees, which meant that there is curvature. It didn't sum to 180, it summed to more than 180. The only way that can happen is if the surface of the Earth is physically curved. Obviously, this takes into account topography and everything. That's all taken into account in the methods done.
How is that taken into account? Notice how, so he's claiming it's all been taken into an account without demonstrating. I mean, that's the critical point, right? I mean, he could have glossed over everything he just said in like 30 seconds, like he just spent minutes on this, and he should have spent 90% of the time clearly demonstrating how it was taken into account and how it would be prove either model, because obviously it doesn't.
Excuse me. And this particular survey was, and what Jesse Kozlowski did was shown on Water Business page where he analyzed it and did the maths to also show that refraction is taken into account, and even without refraction, that it shows the Earth is curved. If you add refraction, which would lift the image up, then it shows that the Earth is 100% curved.
100% curved? What does that mean? It's not partially curved, it's 100% curved. And what does curved mean? Does that mean spherical? I mean, this guy's not even on a first grade English level. Like, what can we do with this debate? This is going to be painful. So, okay. This actually reminds me of Bryant Myers. I did the math. I did the calculation. So we're going to count 5 unicorns, and 5 unicorns equals 10 unicorns. The math is perfect, therefore the unicorns are real. It's like these unicorns are flying across these rainbows, and the unicorns have 2 wings each. There's 5 unicorns, and we're adding all the wings. We're taking into account all the fairies, sprinkling the fairy dust, slowing them down, but they're still making it over the unicorn. But we took account the variables of the fairy dust. Therefore, all the math is perfect. I mean, this level of goofery. I mean, this is hilarious.
All the calculations and everything can be shown on this page. I can give anyone the link to this that they want to look over it themselves. But the outcome of the surveys done by these surveyors is that reciprocal zenith angles sum up to more than 180. And the only possible outcome from that is that the Earth is curved.
I mean, we could already see what this guy's favorite fallacy is. I mean, the false dichotomy. I mean, he's been spamming that the most. False dichotomy, with false cause and circular reasoning right in tow there. He just keeps spamming these same three fallacies ad nauseum.
So here's our next question. Are we going to count super fallacies for all of those? Now, I know earlier I said, let's say in a boxing match, if someone keeps spamming the same uppercut, but it's connecting, you have to give them credit for it. But on the other hand, if we're using the spit your drink out as a result of extreme goofery, you wouldn't necessarily spit your drink out over something that you just heard already. So how are we going to rectify that? I don't know. I think the spit the drink out analogy might be more apt here than the spamming uppercut in a boxing match. What does everybody else think? Tsutsaka, you might want to stop psychologically projecting and learn some basic English first before humiliating yourself here. I mean, your subconscious knows you extremely well. Your psychological projection seems to be very accurate. You skipped all the learning, and then you're just here humiliating yourself. I just explained how the survey is a fallacy. Because he's not just explaining a survey, he's claiming the survey itself demonstrates the Earth is a sphere, that a curved surface can only be a sphere instead of a convex lens type flat plane. The plane underneath the convex lens. I mean, this is a very basic topic. I mean, is it possible you don't have a mental disability if you can't comprehend that? It's not an insult to call out a duck quacking and waddling. Even if the duck denies that it's quacking and waddling, it's clearly observed. All right, so I don't know. I'm not going to count them as super fallacies. I'll give him, I think we should use the spit your drink out analogy. We're not necessarily going to count the super fallacies repetitively. I mean, it's the same thing with zingers, I guess, too. When someone repeats a similar zinger, I didn't really give him credit for two. I just gave him the one. So I guess we could use that for super fallacies as well.
Yeah, I mean, we know what his favorite fallacy is.
Now, there's many measurements that back this up. You can look at historical measurements like the transcontinental triangulation, the American arc of the parallel, and all the other large-scale surveying operations that have been done throughout history to back up this curvature. You can
rope it in the reification logical fallacy, hallucinating that those are all legitimate just based on the amount that there are, and hallucinating that you don't have to clearly delineate all of the everything and all of the factors involved to show how it proves that. Because if somebody counted 5 unicorns and 5 unicorns 100 years ago, 200 years ago, if all these different companies counted the same amount of unicorns with perfect math, that must mean that the unicorns not only existed, but let's say there was a claim that they were flying over certain rainbows in a certain amount of speed, and then they calculated all the fairies, sprinkling the fairy dust with the exact amount of particles and weight of all the fairy dust. It was all measured. It was all measured perfectly, and the math is all perfect, and all these different people throughout history all did it in different countries and different companies. Therefore, it all proves that, right? I mean, you cannot make this stuff up. I mean, this guy really does seem to be as goofy as they come. I just don't think he has the verbal diarrhea prowess that Michael Sartain has to beat the fallacy count, but we'll see.
Look at all the measurements of the rotation of the Earth In fact, there's a good list at mctoon.net/spin that all show that the Earth is rotating. Flat earthers themselves have confirmed that the Earth is rotating. So the fact that there is measurements that everyone can do, it's repeatable, it follows the scientific method, showing.
Whoa! This guy just dropped the scientific method without knowing what it was. So now he's basically verified that his Dunning-Kruger's off the charts.
I don't think stating that the scientific method was followed, even if it wasn't, should be a super fallacy. Anybody else agree? Disagree? I mean, that's a dumb statement, but I don't know if I would. That wouldn't make me spit my drink out. Tsutsaka, why would I want a script from somebody not even on a preschool English level? I mean, that's you must really get a kick out of humiliating yourself, kind of like Craig does, because why else would you do it this much? Does everybody agree that basically saying the scientific method was followed, even if it wasn't, that's not really a super fallacy, right? I mean, obviously that's fallacious, but it wouldn't make me spit my drink out.
So, well, that's the main staple of scientism. It's the hallucination and the pretending of following the scientific method when it doesn't. Because notice he hasn't been able to demonstrate a single time how any of these points how they adhere to the scientific method. He's just claiming they do with zero evidence of how they do.
Both curve and rotation only comes to one conclusion, and that is that the Earth is not flat, it is curved. And that's my time.
Okay, thank you very much. And wherever you guys want to go from here.
Yeah, do you want to talk about the Earth being do you want to substantiate curvature? Do you want to talk about space-time, or do you want to talk about the Coriolis effect first?
Up to you. You can go wherever you like.
Okay, let's talk about gravity. So how do we substantiate that space and time act as a fourth dimensional fabric?
Well, it's not space and time, it's space-time, this one thing. And we can substantiate.
Wow, seriously? He went to the etymological logical fallacy, because we all know what Caleb's point there was. So he's deflecting, and in his trigger, it looks like he's appearing not to be triggered well, because otherwise, why desperately grasp for an etymological logical fallacy? Space and time versus space-time. I mean, wow. I guess, I mean, I don't know. I guess this guy's gonna be unique in his so-called argumentation, so maybe we should be thankful for that. It might not be boring, even though he just keeps spamming the same three fallacies. Although, I mean, he's roping in the etymological logic fallacy here. We'll see if it's a favorite of his. We'll see if he continues to rely on it here, if he doesn't have any real arguments.
That by doing experiments following the scientific method, as you like to insist. The scientific method says that if the light from a distant star passes by a large mass, then that light will deviate a certain amount dictated by the curvature of space-time.
Okay, that's a super fallacy. The scientific method does not state anything about light. Oh, man. What does everybody think? I mean, that was pretty dumb. The scientific method clearly does not state anything about light and space-time. Oh, man. Okay, so he's up to 3 super fallacies. So technically, the revised count would be 90 regular fallacies and 3 super fallacies for people just jumping in here. And no dingers or zingers thus far.
The scientific method states that? What? The scientific method doesn't talk about any of those things. So this guy clearly demonstrating he doesn't understand the scientific method. He doesn't understand dependent and independent variables or control. He doesn't understand.
Neil, it does in the Star Wars dictionary. I haven't read that one, so I wouldn't know
any of this. And yeah, I mean, let's see how Caleb responds here. Because let's see if Caleb recognizes the level of mental deficiency he's up against, or if he's simply gonna appeal and talk to the audience. Because I mean, Austin Whitsitt usually does that, but we'll see. We'll see what Caleb does here.
Then we can test that, and that was done in the Edmonton experiment of 1919 and many other times.
So no surprise, this guy is completely clueless about the hoax of 1919 in Edmonton. I went over this so extensively on other podcasts. I'll throw it up on the screen. I'll throw it on the screen right here, just super quickly. I believe in the Einstein Debunked podcast on MindShock, I went over that extensively, and I also went over that on one or two other Flat Earth.
And just real quick here, being ignorant of this, I wouldn't consider that a super fallacy or a dinger. Because, I mean, a lot of people don't know this. I mean, you would think someone going on some kind of a public platform to debate the topic would know it. But, again, it wouldn't make me spit my drink out per se. Does anybody think the ignorance of this should be counted as a super fallacy or dinger?
But I'll throw it up on the screen real quick here. And for those that don't know, they basically threw out all the data that didn't match, and Eddington himself admitted the hoax years later. And there was no technology to magically measure the eclipse as they were claiming to, and this ignores all the shifting. I mean, it's just, it would take me an hour to go through all of it again. Just check out Einstein Debunked. Run zCal completely dismantles all of relativity, but I did go into the history of it on that podcast and a few others. I can drop a link to that as well for those that are interested. So he's just throwing out this terminology randomly, as if it makes him look.
Oh, so actually, it was on the Sartain debate, I guess, and not the Einstein Debunked, although I might have threw it on the screen for that as well. I'm just going to skip over this because we already went over this.
Is, of course, the Dunning-Kruger effect. But it did not substantiate Einstein's so-called theories by any stretch of the imagination. But all the scientism cultist goofs, they just repeat with religious fervor. They just regurgitate these tenets of their religion as if they're true.
To show that light from a distant star will bend when it gets close to our star, will change its path, the predicted amount according to Einstein's equations.
Do we have the star plates from the observation of 1919?
Do we have the star plates?
Yep, that's how he made the observation, did he not?
I don't have them. What do you mean, do we have them?
Should that be a dinger? Saying, I don't have them? Why would he? Nobody's asking if Craig personally has them. Should that be a dinger? I mean, we're I don't know, actually. This is a tough one. It's not a clear-cut dinger, but that was kind of a dumb thing to say. Heracles says, yes, it should be a dinger. Anybody else have opinions? I mean, we need to get at least a couple people voting on this, because I'm on the fence. Heracles says yes. I mean, Caleb's asking for plates from an experiment over 100 years ago. And Craig is responding that he personally does not have the plates. Yes, Neil, well, I'm not sure if he knows that. Are we sure that Craig knows that? But you vote yes for the dinger. Tiffany votes yes. Okay, we're giving him a dinger. The first dinger in the history of MindShock analyses. At 103 fallacies, Craig got his first dinger. We're going to review all this at the end again. CF also votes yes. Okay, so we're all in agreement here. Regardless of whether Craig truly understood whether Caleb was asking whether he had them or not personally. I mean, that was still just because, I mean, I don't know. This is crazy.
Does anybody have them, or did we lose them?
I've no idea.
So here he is admitting the fact. That's an interesting point there by Caleb. He went the route of demanding verification.
Well, also, he could have just said, I have no idea, instead of saying he doesn't have them. So it seems like it should be a dinger regardless of whether he comprehended or not.
So being scientific instead of religious. And I don't know if he did, I'm guessing here he baited into admitting his religion and just blind faith in.
Well, if you think logic is pointless, Tsutsaka, why are you here? Other than to entertain us with your Dunning-Kruger stylings, which I appreciate, by the way. I mean, you know.
To the calculations without actually verifying the calculations, or whether they could have even have been made in the way they said they were made. Obviously not. And I would have focused on all the data that they threw out. But good point by Caleb. I mean, maybe he will as well. I mean, that's actually, it's kind of hilarious how this young kid is just humiliating this middle-aged scientism goof. He baited him into that one pretty hilariously.
Well, the answer is we don't have them anymore. We've lost them, apparently, due to just a long time from it being observed. And so how do we substantiate without having the star plates that the stars even convex towards the sun in the first place? And also, isn't light massless? Why is space-time being warped acting on a massless thing?
Okay, two questions there. So the first one is you can repeat the experiment, which has been done many times. I can provide you with a list of experiments very similar to the Eddington experiment in 1919.
I would be curious to see that list, because I've never seen that. I mean, without built-in assumptions, of course. Without those built-in assumptions, and without completely throwing out everything that doesn't match up.
Science likes to have repeatable experiments.
Would people consider an error of a factor of 4, so over 400% error minimum? I mean, it could be a lot greater than that. I went over all the sources there, including, I think it was a Harvard source on this. So, yeah, they're clearly not repeatable. And again, I'm not going to count that as a super fallacy, just because, again, it wouldn't make me spit my drink out. Whereas saying I don't have them, I mean, that's borderline, maybe. I mean, that's pretty silly.
And it is certainly repeatable following the predictions. And light, although massless, is energy, and as Einstein's equivalence principle shows us, E equals mc squared, energy is equivalent to mass, which means that it will be affected by gravitational effects, especially when you talk about Einstein, because it's the physical fabric of the space that is warping. Imagine walking on a curved surface. Even if you were walking in a straight line yourself, the curved surface will change the direction that you are going. And because the space-time itself is curved, the straight path of light is changed based on that curvature of space-time. And funnily enough, even Newton actually predicted that the path of light would be altered by large masses, although his predictions showed it to be a lot less than Einstein's were.
Wow. Okay. A lot of religious propaganda and dogma stacked there. Wow. So clearly this guy's never heard of Run Z Cow. He's never seen Einstein's relatively completely dismantled. And so Newton also, this guy's just this clueless about all history. I mean, it's kind of weird. So I don't even know where to start here, because I mean, just the level of ignorance here of just the historical timeline, let alone what is being claimed, how, and of course, experiments needing dependent variables, independent variables, and controls. You know what? I'm gonna try to make this as simple as possible. Let's go to Walter Lewin, the famous MIT physics professor. I mean, he's got 450 papers, books. I mean, this is kind of, I mean, this isn't that advanced here, because we're not talking about things that are so advanced. Like, for example, what would be the difference between gravity's effects and electromagnetic effects, and at what scale? Because even Walter Lewin admits here, and I'm assuming, again, this is my assumption, is that Walter Lewin is a heliocentric globe earther. I don't know the guy personally. I've never seen the question asked of him. He's this MIT professor. I'm assuming that he is a heliocentric globe earther. But whether he is or he isn't, he clearly demonstrates you can use math, you could use whatever you want.
I'm going to skip through this just because it's not directly relevant to super fallacies at the moment. What's up, Midnight Ventures? Did you just get here?
Cancels. They both have d squared downstairs. And so you will easily be able to show that this ratio is roughly 10 to the 36. So the electric force is 36 orders of magnitude more potent than the gravitational attraction. This teaches you some respect, perhaps, for 802. If these were the only forces that acted on the protons, and you bring them in the nucleus, which has a size of only 10 to the minus 12 centimeters, then the acceleration that the proton will experience is the electric force divided by the mass of the proton, F equals ma, basis of 801. And if you take this electric force, when you make d 10 to the minus 12 centimeters, which is 10 to the minus 14 meters, and you calculate this ratio, you will find that it is 26 orders of magnitude higher than the gravitational acceleration on Earth. 26 orders of magnitude higher. So you wonder what the hell holds the nucleus together if there is such a tremendous force on these protons. Well, what is holding them together are the nuclear forces, which we do not fully understand, but thank goodness the nuclear forces are not part of 802, so I'll leave that alone for now. So what holds our world together? Well, on the nuclear scale, 10 to the minus 12 centimeters, very important are the nuclear forces. On an atomic scale, up to thousands of kilometers, it's really electric forces that hold our world together. The electric forces are way more powerful than gravitational force.
I actually didn't skip it. I allowed it to play through Tsutsaka just for you.
So the electric force is 36 orders of magnitude more potent than the gravitational attraction. It's really electric forces that hold our world together.
So not knowing that also, I don't know if that should be a super fallacy or a dinger, although with Bryant Myers, when he specifically referenced Lewin, maybe that could be a dinger because he did know about that specific lecture, allegedly. And, of course, all of the electric forces. How is it a misrepresentation? I mean, this is basic English, Tsutsaka. He's saying on a local scale, gravity's not powerful enough to affect anything. I mean, what is there to misrepresent there? If he's a heliocentric globe believer who believes in the heliocentric universe, he's saying that gravity would impact large masses like planets and their rotation. He clearly states that up to several thousand kilometers, it's really the electric forces. Beyond thousands of kilometers, I'm assuming that he's claiming gravity would be applicable. So there's nothing to misrepresent there. I was about to skip through it, but then I didn't. I let it play through just for you.
So I didn't hear just saying. So does gravity act upon mass only?
No, gravity is a warping of space-time which can affect energy.
Okay. Where is it said that it can affect energy? Where is that said?
Einstein's equivalence principle, E equals mc squared. Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. So mass is energy, effectively. So one is interchangeable with the other under certain conditions and energies, and therefore it can be affected in the same way. And again, only Newton, his descriptions of gravity said that it would affect only mass.
Okay, so is there any evidence of the manifestation of any of this? Also, just because I feel kind of bad for Craig here, because this guy is such a mentally disabled goof, he doesn't even understand. And if he does, I don't know why he doesn't talk about it. Because in the context of this question, and even understanding what the theory is, let alone whether it's true or not, gravity acting upon both mass and energy all comes down to the energy momentum tensor of general relativity.
And for those that don't know, I was actually steelmanning Craig here on how he could have answered this question. Not that there's evidence that it's true, but there is some establishment for this. He obviously either doesn't know about it, probably doesn't know about it. So it was funny because I think in his mental health spiral, he was thinking that I was attacking him here by bringing it up. I didn't cut anything out. What are you talking about? You want me to play a 3-hour lecture from Walter Lewin, most of which he spends talking about subjects not related to this? Is that what you want? Like, if you're that interested in things that have nothing to do with this, yeah, you can go watch the lecture, but...
So notice how Craig didn't even mention it. So he's not even like a high-level scientism priest. He doesn't even really understand relativity that well, or special relativity. I mean, let's go to Wikipedia. I mean, let's try to break this down as simple as possible. And by the way, I am not like a forefront expert in relativity. I understand the basics of it, which clearly Craig does not. But even just let's just go on Wikipedia just for 2 seconds to understand basic relativity here. The stress energy tensor, sometimes called the stress energy momentum tensor or the energy momentum tensor, is a tensor physical quantity that describes the density and flux of energy and momentum in space-time, generalizing the stress tensor of Newtonian physics. It is an attribute of matter, radiation, and non-gravitational force fields. The density and flux of energy and momentum are the sources of the gravitational field in the Einstein field equations of general relativity, just as mass density is the source of such a field in Newtonian gravity. So we don't need to go any further than this. This is just a very simple, a super simple, cursory overview of the gravitational field itself. What is the source of the gravitational field? The density and flux of energy and momentum are allegedly the sources of this alleged field in all of these equations, where gravity could theoretically act on all of this because of the stress energy tensor. I mean, this is a very simple explanation. Very, very simple. But notice how this Craig goof he doesn't have the mental capacity. It's just not there. Now, that doesn't mean this is true. I'm not alleging any of relativity is true. And actually, I would say the opposite, because Runzi Cow actually debunked this so easily. And if you look at the hoax of 1919, I mean, this isn't rocket science. And then, of course, I'm actually surprised Craig here didn't mention the so-called discovery of gravitational waves, which is, of course, just injected data and easily explained by other magnetic means, which I'll go into if he brings up gravitational waves. I actually went over that also on the Relativity Debunked podcast.
What fade out are you talking about, Tsutsaka? I replayed what he said so people would understand it. I just replayed the same thing that he said. I might have zoomed in slightly, but I just replayed literally what he said so that even really, really deficient goofs like yourself would have that point hammered home, that it's really electric forces that hold our world together.
But Einstein doesn't say that. Einstein's predictions are that this curvature of space-time will affect the path of light. That's what Einstein says.
Are you under the impression that E equals mc squared is in any way related to the theory of relativity that explains gravitation? They're two totally different subjects. You realize that, right?
Yeah, I said it's the equivalence principle.
I mean, this guy's sputtering now. I mean, this young kid is just calling out the goofery. Because, I mean, this is not a good priest of scientism or relativity. I mean, this guy just doesn't even know the basics of the religion he's purporting is true. So clearly he's the absolute worst person to be even discussing this. I mean, Caleb would probably make a better argument in favor of relativity in a globe Earth than Craig can here. And that would actually be a good exercise. I think they should have flipped roles, because I think Caleb can probably be way more convincing. And that's kind of a common theme in a lot of these flat Earth debates. The flat Earther actually has a greater understanding of relativity and the globe Earth model than the globe Earthers arguing it. Now, that doesn't mean the flat Earther is correct about anything. It's just,
if there was a cut to Tsaka, it might have been him just going through the minutia of the equations, like literally just saying numbers in the equations, which is not really, I mean, I guess he could add up why the electric forces are so much more powerful, but that's not really relevant to the point. You want somebody spending countless hours writing something out. Why would you want to, if you want to watch that whole lecture, it's online. Well, clearly you're not on a preschool level. If you think you want someone to play a 3-hour lecture when the summarized point is that the electric forces hold our world together up to a scale of thousands of kilometers. I left it in the clip. There's a shorter clip where he doesn't state on a cosmological scale, gravity takes over. That wasn't hidden anywhere. But don't stop spiraling now, Tsutsaka. Neil, what do you mean about Einstein's equivalence principle? I mean, there's a lot of problems with it, because the unequal masses don't necessarily fall at the same rate. I went over this on the Bryant-Myers debate, because what scientism calls anomalies or whatever, 9.8 meter per second fall is actually not uniform. It's not uniform. And there's a few different studies that show that. I put that on the screen in the Bryant-Myers debate. Clearly not, Tsutsaka. Or do you mean I took it out in the replay? Like, I played the whole thing through, and then at the end I played a shorter version of it to save time.
they have a greater understanding of relativity and the globe Earth theory. But let me break it down a little bit simpler. Basically, the stress energy tensor is the source of the gravitational field in Einstein's field equations of general relativity. Mass density is the source of such a field in Newtonian gravity, and this is without going into Isaac Newton on what he actually thought about that, written in his own words. So we're just going over the modern scientism texts. They attribute his name to that. So obviously, Caleb asked the question of gravity acting on energy. Craig responded with E equals mc squared, the equivalence of mass and energy, but not in relation specifically to gravity. which is what Caleb was asking about. And this is why, again, this guy has to have a mental disability, because he doesn't understand the questions. He doesn't even understand the theory he's claiming is true, and he believes in religiously. I mean, it's almost like a devout Christian who doesn't understand anything in the Bible, gets all the verses wrong and forgot about entire gospels, trying to preach the validity of the Bible. I mean, that's kind of what Craig is doing here. I mean, it's hilarious in one way, but it's extremely sad in another. I mean, it's just so pathetic. I kind of have to feel bad for the guy. I didn't think I'd be feeling bad for this guy, but yeah, I mean, this is rough.
I'm probably only going to go another 20 minutes or so right now, and then we can pick this up later tonight. I know there's people in other time zones that are very passionate about this topic, and I want to get their input on super fallacies and dingers and tweaking the system as well. So we'll go for another 15, 20 minutes, and then we'll take a break.
So it doesn't have to do with anything with. So there's
like be considered to have mass in certain circumstances, you would go to E equals mc squared, where energy is mass. So that answers you. It's a lot deeper, you know, and basically more than an undergraduate understanding of physics to get into that equation.
Energy doesn't equal mass. Energy is a factor or a modality of mass in that equation.
Again, if Craig knew even the basics, he would be talking about the stress energy tensor, because that actually addresses the difference between Newtonian-based gravity and Einstein's relativity, where the source of the gravitational field is the density and flux of energy momentum itself in Einstein's field equations of general relativity. Mass, density, Newtonian gravity. I mean, just to boil it down to these simple terms. But if Craig even knows what the stress energy tensor is, I mean, this goof's not even bringing it up, because that would address the issue at hand, instead of trying to spam E equals mc squared like some goof who only watched, you know, some little snippets of Einstein propaganda. Everybody knows E equals mc squared, so he's just throwing that around without actually understanding anything of substance behind it.
Okay, so is this a super fallacy? So we have another decision to make here, because, I mean, I want to dumb this down as much as possible. Obviously, Tsutsaka needs the help. So mass energy equivalence doesn't necessarily mean they're exactly the same thing. I mean, okay, let's look at this explanation from desy.de. Relativistic mass is equivalent to energy, which is why relativistic mass is not a commonly used term nowadays. In the modern view, mass is not equivalent to energy. Mass is just that part of the energy of a body which is not kinetic energy. Mass is independent of velocity, whereas energy is not. That was probably the most succinct explanation, and this again is on desy.de. I mean, most of their stuff's not in English, but it is a science resource. So again, big logical fallacy stack. Are we going to call that a super fallacy, though? I don't know. I'm leaning no, but on the other hand, if the specific conversation is about this and he's that other coolest, But if we use the metric, are you going to spit your drink out? I guess no. What does everybody think? I'm leaning no, it's not a super fallacy, but because he only hit, let's say, so he's at three super fallacies and one dinger. So fairly conservative numbers with the new metrics. Neil's not sure. I mean, I could read the definition again from DESY. Relativistic mass is equivalent to energy, which is why relativistic mass is not a commonly used term nowadays. In the modern view, mass is not equivalent to energy. Mass is independent of velocity, whereas energy is not. I mean, that's kind of a big difference. So Tiffany's voting no on the super fallacy. Yeah, this is on the fence. I could go either way on this, just because. I mean, I guess the average person might find it confusing enough that they wouldn't spit their drink out. But again, if we're talking about some kind of scientific conference where people are expected to know these things, it would be a super fallacy in that environment. Now, random people debating on the internet, perhaps that shouldn't be a super fallacy. CF. Heracles, what do you think? Super fallacy or not? We'll err on the side of caution. Let's give Craig the benefit of the doubt. I'm gonna go another 10 minutes or so on this, and then we'll take a break and pick up later tonight for people who are still around and all the people that are in a different time zone and are still sleeping right now.
They're equivalent. That's the equivalence principle.
So in your mind, energy and something physical are the exact same thing.
But energy can become mass. That's something that happens.
Okay, I'll ask the question again.
I mean, that's an interesting dodge. So it looks like Craig, mentally disabled or not, he does have the modicum of mental capacity to realize he's been completely exposed and decimated already.
Were we lagging there? Okay. I think, yeah, sometimes the longer streams increase some of the hangs or lags. Yeah, Tsutsaka, YouTube doesn't put out notifications, so even some of the bigger channels with hundreds of thousands of subs or even 1 million subs, sometimes most of the people don't get notifications.
So he can only cope with saying, oh, energy can become mass. But that wasn't the question about gravity acting on energy itself. So all he's doing is deflecting and dodging, proving he either didn't understand the question or he knows he doesn't know the answer, so he can only sputter in his Dunning-Kruger stupor.
Mass and energy, which energy is not defined in today's terms anyway. Nobody can define the term energy. What is energy? What is energy, Craig?
Amount of work done. Well, mathematically, what do you want it to mean? What do you mean no one can define what energy is?
What do you want it to be? That's gonna be a dinger. That would make me spit my drink out. So we are at 3 super fallacies and 2 dingers. Does anybody think that's not a dinger? What do you want it to be? Oh, man. Is everybody in agreement that that's a dinger? My reaction here was pretty funny.
What do you want it to be? This guy can't even give a definite. Wow. I wasn't expecting this level of mental disability.
Work done. Well, mathematically, what do you want it to mean?
Wow. Wow. I mean, this is crazy. This guy can't even define it. He answered, "What do you want it to be?" I mean, has this guy just watched the OC so many times that his brain is completely fried? What do you want it to be? As if what Caleb wants it to be has anything to do with an empirically verifiable definition. And then he also starts to sputter mathematically.
Work done. Well, mathematically, what work done? Well, mathematically,
What does math have to do with it? I mean, when do we learn the definition of energy? I mean, I don't know if this is first grade. This might be second or third grade. I mean, it's simply the capacity to do work. I mean, you can go to dictionary. Let's forget science. Let's go to dictionary.com. The capacity or power to do work by application of force. Energy can exist in a variety of forms: electrical, mechanical, chemical, thermal, nuclear, and can be transferred from one form to another. But, I mean, the capacity to do work, I mean, it's so simple. Children know this. And this supposedly functional adult in Craig asks, what do you want it to be? Man, this guy's sinking so fast. I mean, is this the fastest sinking we've ever seen? Because we're just past the introduction here. I mean, we're just getting going and this guy's already sunk. I mean, this is insane. He starts stuttering.
Work done. Well, what work done? Well, what?
Saying mathematics. He can't give a basic definition, just a couple words, like a sentence definition. Capacity to do work. I mean, I'm actually shocked. I'm actually mind. I mean, I knew he might have a mental disability. I've seen clips from this guy, but I didn't know it was this severe. I mean, how does this guy function in day-to-day life? What do you want it to be? I've never seen any debate, flat earth or otherwise, where someone's given that dumb of a response. I mean, this is crazy. This is truly mind-shocking.
See how you're not able to define it? What is energy?
Energy is the amount of work done.
What? It's not the amount of work. What? I mean, you can see the expression on this guy's face. I mean, he's just stuttering and sputtering. Energy is the capacity. It's.
Should that be a super fallacy? Or another dinger? Obviously, energy is not the amount of work done. I mean, this is probably 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, maybe? Would this be another dinger? Not knowing the basic definition of energy. What does everybody think? I don't know. I'm on the fence on this one. Also, the fact that he answered that like a question, like, you know, some little kid in class where the teacher asks a question, even when they answer it correctly, they answer it like a question, which is what he just did. And he's supposed to be at least a semi-functioning adult having a debate on a scientific topic. So I'll put that as a maybe, and we'll review these again. That'll be the 3rd dinger. So he's got 3 super fallacies, 3 dingers so far.
It's not a conclusion. So if like a boulder was moved, the amount of energy required to move the boulder was the definition of the energy itself. The amount? What? I mean, this is insane. This guy is literally the most mentally disabled individual I've ever seen participate in a debate. I mean, I don't think it's even. I mean, you know, Sartain might have a mental disability as well, but I mean, Sartain was clearly intellectually dishonest as well. With this guy, I mean, I'm starting to really lean just full on borderline vegetable. I mean, this guy. I mean, what do you want it to be? He's giving OC answers. Like, what is this?
Which kind of, it depends on the context that you want energy described. You want energy described in the context of mathematics. You want energy described in the context of mechanical principles.
I want it described in simple terms for a child to be able to understand.
Yes, Caleb, yes. Let's keep it simple. Obviously, Craig is trying to, dazzle with the BS. And intentionally try to make everything seem so complex because he doesn't have the basics down. So how many copes? I mean, there's not a lot of copes for this situation. You got to feel bad for Craig here. I mean, what other cope can he grasp to? I mean, it's not like he has a lot of options.
It's saying that energy is the amount of work to be done on something cannot be influenced by gravitation. You would agree, right?
Sorry, I didn't mean to overtalk there. You cut out. I apologize. And energy is literally the capacity to do work.
It looks like he just looked it up. Did everybody see that? When he moved like his eyes to the side, he looked it up because he didn't know. That's hilarious. He had to look up the definition of energy. This is the guy he's debating. He wants to talk cosmological theories. He wants to talk cosmologies and advanced physics. This guy can't even come up with the definition of energy by himself. He starts talking about what do you want it to be.
Jaronism looks so disappointed in Craig here. Like, he actually looks angry. Jaronism looks angry that a guy going on this debate can't give the definition of energy without looking it up or asking the other guy what he wants it to be.
Oh man. I don't know if I'm going to make it through this.
That's what energy is.
So how does gravitation affect the capacity to do work?
Well, the capacity to work is interchangeable.
That was pretty dumb. Again, we can go back to the DESY website. Relativistic mass is equivalent to energy, which is why relativistic mass is not a commonly used term nowadays. In the modern view, mass is not equivalent to energy. Mass is just that part of the energy of a body which is not kinetic energy. Mass is independent of velocity, whereas energy is not. That's very, very critical in discussing these things. But obviously, Craig doesn't understand any of this. But should that be a super fallacy? I don't know. I'm gonna give him another maybe there. So he might be at 4 dingers. Or should it be a dinger or super fallacy? That's tough too. Should this be a dinger or a super fallacy? I'll put it in the maybe pile. No. Obviously, energy can be there could be conversions that take place. It's not just interchangeable, kind of like a word, like big and large are interchangeable words. I mean, you can't say that for energy and mass. You can't just interchange them magically based on nothing. Energy, energy doesn't just magically turn into mass. In certain equations, according to theories, they can effectively be interchangeable, sure. That's completely different. And the fact that Craig doesn't even have the mental capacity to grasp these simple concepts, I have to applaud Caleb here. I have to really applaud his patience. I mean, I don't know how old Caleb is, but this is like, I mean, what is he? Is he a teenager, early 20s, whatever he is? I mean, this is like having a conversation with a 1-year-old. I mean, I don't want to insult 1-year-olds. Maybe there are 1-year-olds out there that are smarter than Craig, but there's no processing going on here.
Energy equals mass.
That's what I'm saying. So do you think that mass and this idea of energy are completely the exact same thing? You think that this water bottle is the same as energy, hypothetical energy that can't be defined here?
Well, you could define everything in that water bottle in the terms of energy.
And notice how he didn't answer the question. He asked if you thought it was the same thing. So that's a yes or no type answer. Unless he thinks it's a malformed question, in which he should address that. But instead of failing to answer, because if it's no, then this. If it's yes because of this, or it's a malformed question or fallacious question because of this. He did none of those things.
So you think they're the exact same thing? It's a very simple question.
Yeah, I just answered. All of the materials in that bottle can be defined in the terms of energy.
Okay.
So he still didn't answer the question. So you really know who you're dealing with here. Because someone who had even just a basic understanding, again, they would say yes because of this, no because of this, or that's a fallacious question because of this. And he did none of those things. I mean, it was almost like a politician answer there. Because, I mean, I don't know. Does that point deception? What do all the listeners think here? Does everything think? So what are the options? He has a mental disability and he's being intentionally dishonest. So the very few concepts that he does comprehend, he's going to be dishonest about them anyway. Is that the solution here, not to fall for false dichotomies?
So let's talk about the space-time fabric. So you said...
All right, I'm actually going to stop this here. We've been streaming for a while. So here's the roundup. Craig committed either 3 super fallacies, which would bring the current count to 140 fallacies, and 3 super fallacies. And he also has a minimum of 2 dingers. And the 140th fallacy could have either been a super fallacy or a dinger. That's what we're up to so far. We'll pick this up probably later tonight because I know a lot of astute mind shockers aren't here right now and they definitely want to be part of this. So we'll pick this up later tonight and I'll do a super quick recap. Tsutsaka, hopefully you'll be back spamming your Dunning-Kruger stylings, humiliating yourself for our entertainment. Always appreciated. Hope everybody enjoyed another edition of the MindShock podcast. Neil, the next stream in hours, I'm not sure actually, maybe in about 5 hours, maybe in 4 or 5 hours. You got it, Tiffany. If you want to help support the MindShock podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Hit that bell for notifications. If you're not getting notifications, just like and share and comment. That appears to be how the YouTube algorithm works. You could also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube for access to exclusive streams and chats. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind. Leave them in the comments section. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.